Morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada on June 18th, Thursday. Vera Lynn, who sings that song, we'll meet again. There'll be birds over the white cliffs of Dover. And a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. Vera Lynn died at 103 yesterday. I thought I'd begin the show today by reminding us we're all mortal, even people who sing immortal songs. Good morning to you. There's a lot of news for today's The Rundown. Let me get to it. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo continues his meetings in Hawaii with his Chinese counterpart over the strained relationship in Beijing and Washington, D.C., over Hong Kong, Taiwan, and many other issues. Those are important meetings and not getting a lot of attention, but I'll bring you up to speed with whatever happens there if anything is announced in the course of this morning's show. In a move that is guaranteed, I think guaranteed, to reelect Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado, the Senate voted to guarantee $900 million in funding for conservation acquisition. It's a Cory Gardner bill replenishing the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Big win for Cory Gardner. Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve says the stimulus measures have to be renewed by July. I wrote about this in the Washington Post yesterday. In order to keep the recovery going, I think that will be a prod to the Senate to do just that. The EPA announced yesterday they're not going to regulate perchlorate. Now, I always have to note, my son works at the EPA, so I have a conflict of interest, but I declare it. This rulemaking, which is not a rulemaking, it's an intention not to do a rulemaking, has enormous economic consequences for the recovery for everyone who is afraid of a rule regulating perchlorate. That was a favorite of Team Obama-Biden. And if Team Obama-Biden comes back in the form of Joe Biden, the front man for AOC and the whole left wing of the Democratic Party, expect them to regulate perchlorate and everything else. But in the meantime, economic growth will not be obscured. Major League Baseball, yesterday I was bemoaning that it was not going to happen. Well, last night they appear to have reached an agreement on a 60-game season beginning July 19th. That is the good news of the morning. The Justice Department is proposing limiting internet company protections, according to the Wall Street Journal. This will probably have the farthest-reaching effect on your life. The proposal will remove legal protections when platforms facilitate or solicit third-party content or activity that violates federal criminal law, according to the Wall Street Journal, such as online scams and trafficking illicit or counterfeit drugs. Internet companies would lose immunities if they acknowledge that unlawful conduct is taking place on their platform and they show reckless disregard for how users are behaving on their sites. Without those legal protections, tech companies could be exposed to claims for monetary damages from people allegedly harmed by online fraud and other illegal activity. That will mean they have to completely increase their hands-off approach right now. The department, DOJ, also wouldn't confer immunity to platforms in instances involving online child exploitation and sexual abuse, terrorism, or cyber stalking. It's a bill that I think is going to fly through Congress. Remember Danny Masterson in that 70s show? He played Hyde. He's been charged with raping 3 women in incidents that occurred between 2001 and 2003. Don't ask me why it took so long, but Hyde is in trouble. Now, the big story of the morning, of course, is John Bolton. Justice Department sued last night to stop the publication of John Bolton's book, In the Room Where It Happened. The Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal all covered the book extensively. It's got, I would say, grade B allegations in it, that he asked President Xi to help him with re-election, that he didn't like Jim Mattis very much, that Mike Pompeo said something bad about the president. All I know is that the New York Times hated the book. That tells you that the book does not deliver. Look, I haven't seen the book. They didn't send me the book. Everyone in D.C.'s got the book except me, but apparently the ambassador knew I wouldn't read it because it hadn't been pre-cleared. And I will not read a book that isn't pre-cleared. Can get people killed if it's got classified information in it. And when it eventually publishes, I'll read it. But I did enjoy the review because the review can't possibly have classified information in it, because I read the review and I said there can't be anything in it. And someone told me, some reporter yesterday said, there can't be classified information in it because the Trump administration says it contains lies. And if they're lies, lies aren't classified. I said, oh, you're so wrong, because so many lies are classified because they're lies of people who are under surveillance or sources and methods that include lies within them. And so I just don't deal with books that haven't gone through pre-review classification, so I won't be covering it. But I do want you to, I won't be reading it until after it's disclosed, but I do want you to hear what the New York Times had to say about it. The New York Times didn't like it at all. It said John Bolton may be the last person many Americans wish to hear from right now. Not that he would ever deign to make any concessions to what a reader might want. And so it begins with a slap at John Bolton. The room where it happened, an account of the 17 months as Trump's national security advisor, has been written with so little discernible attention to style and narrative that Bolton apparently presumes an audience is hanging on his every word. Known as a fastidious note-taker, Bolton has filled his book's nearly 500 pages with minute and often extraneous details, including the time and length of routine meetings and even at one point a nap. Underneath it all, of course, is a festering obsession with his enemies, both abroad, Iran, North Korea, and at home, the media, the high-minded, the former Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis. The book is bloated with self-importance, even though it mostly recounts as Bolton not being able to accomplish very much. It toggles between two discordant registers, exceedingly tedious and slightly unhinged. Still, it may be a fitting combination for a lavishly bewhiskered figure whose wonkishness and warmongering can make him seem like an unlikely hybrid of Ned Flanders and Yosemite Sam. Thus does the abiding hatred for Bolton trump the paragraphs intended in his book to wound Donald Trump. One-day story. One-day story. Now, the headline of the Washington Post is Trump asks Xi to help him win re-election. The Wall Street Journal says Trump put re-election prospects ahead of the national interest, Bolton alleges. And I think it's a one-day story, and I believe John will have. I like the ambassador a lot. I read his previous book. He is detail-oriented, but I'm not going to read it till it's cleared, and I don't think you ought to either. I take that very seriously. I also have sort of the Nixon approach to this. If you work for Team Nixon, you never talk about what happens in the room where it happens. The premise of the song, The Room Where It Happens, is that no one ever talked about the room where it happens because it's just not what's done. It's been 40 years since I worked for President Nixon and 30 years since I worked for President Reagan. I've written 14 books. I don't talk about it. An Atlanta police officer was charged with felony murder in the death of Rashard Brooks yesterday. Felony murder means you can get the death penalty in Georgia. Also, Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's, which are rooted in racist imagery, are changing, according to PepsiCo, their brands. The owner of these supermarket staples, much like the owners of the classic film Gone with the Wind and popular TV shows, are rethinking their products and marketing, according to the Wall Street Journal this morning. And in the Telegraph of Great Britain comes news that northern towns are leading the post-coronavirus property surge. This is happening in Maine, by the way, in Tennessee and other places where New Yorkers and Beltway people are fleeing to buy second homes away from urban crush, acting because they have money on the impulse, let's get away from the virus. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is actually happening. So what are markets doing? This is brought to you by Birch Gold. To get your portfolio diversified, which you ought very much to have done already, and you need to do now, you send my name, Hugh, to 474747. Text it for Hugh to 474747. And Birch Gold, which has got the best rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of thumbs up reviews, will send you all the information on rolling over a portion of your IRA or 401k, or you can buy gold directly from Birch Gold. You can also visit hughgold.com. Birch Gold is the place to get precious metals into your portfolio, either your retirement portfolio or your safety deposit box, one way or the other. Yesterday, we had a mixed market. The Dow was down 170 points, the NASDAQ was up 14, and the S&P was down 11. Overnight, not much going on in the world. The England index is down 0.11%. The German index is down 0.3%. Overnight, the Japan index closed down 0.45%. Light crude is up to $38 a barrel. Gold is down just a tick to $17.32. And the 10-year bond is at 0.73%, remains the best time ever for mortgages. But my bottom line remains my bottom line every morning when I tell you what happened in markets yesterday and the overseas during the night. For a morning show, I can't tell you what's going to happen in the market today. All I can tell you is you got to own some gold, and you got to go to Birch Gold to do that. I'm a big believer in having a diversified portfolio. The only stock I actually own outright is Amazon, which went up $25 yesterday as the transition of the new.
Attention business owners. As America gets back to work, will customers know you're there? With little warning, the coronavirus attacked our nation and our well-being in ways we never anticipated. The tragic loss of life, unprecedented economic upheaval, and a shattered sense of security has left many individuals and businesses in shambles. While the aftershocks could be felt for months to come, they may not have to. There is hope for an extraordinary turnaround of your bottom line. But will you be prepared for America's grand reopening? All signs point to the biggest business opportunity of our lifetime, coming as early as this summer. A recent survey of local advertisers shows a 10-point jump in the number of local advertisers who plan to maintain or increase their spending. 1 in 4 businesses expect to spend more in advertising by the end of June, and more than half expect to restart or surge their spending by this summer. As the numbers forecast increased spending from advertisers across the country, will your message be seen and heard? Will your business benefit from the pent-up consumer demand? Salem Surround is prepared to help you deliver the right advertising message to reach all potential customers wherever they are. Your business can be ready for a post-COVID-19 economy, but the time to act is now. Be at the front of the line as our economy begins to fire on all cylinders once again. For a free assessment of your marketing message and strategy, visit salemsurround.com or contact your local media strategist today.
This is Owen Strand for townhall.com. A call is going out now for the dismantling of the Minneapolis Police Department. The president of the city council said this when asked about what to do in the case of a break-in.
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
There's no doubt that our cities and communities need restoration, including greater peaceful engagement between police and citizens. Yet the idea that wanting protection is privilege is not sound. In fact, it's absurd and won't restore anything. Police who act unjustly are accountable to the rule of law and must be. But there is no need to qualify what a society without police will look like. More harm will surely be done. May coming days bring greater safety and meaningful restoration. I'm Owen Strand.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious freedom is being violated. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
I have said that the 2016 election was the most important, and even more important than the 2020. Now I'm thinking 2020 is as important as 2016. Not because of the re-election of Donald Trump, which I think is very important, but because the left will come into power. The left could have both houses of Congress and the presidency, and that would go very far in ending free speech in this country, which is already threatened beyond anything in American history. But my heart breaks for the lack of celebration of America, for the celebration of those who hate America. Antifa takes over a police station in Seattle, and a 6-block area declares itself independent from the United States. Can you imagine if right-wing people took over a central place in Seattle and declared it independent of the United States. The calls for immediate action to take it down. Can you imagine? We are going to create a pro-life 6-block area. Imagine that.
On YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The room where it happened is John Bolton's new book, and the Department of Justice is sued to stop its publication. Very hard to win a prior restraint. And so watch that space. I don't think they'll win the prior restraint. It's very difficult to win the prior restraint, even if there is classified information in there, unless it can be shown that there would be an immediate consequence that I think threatens someone's individual life or safety, though might be hard for a court to reach that decision. I'll keep you posted if a decision comes down in the course of the show. Yesterday, the big moment came on the Senate floor. First of all, good old dumb Dick Durbin of Illinois got up and made this statement on the Senate floor. Dick Durbin, of course, white man from Chicago, talking about Tim Scott, black man from South Carolina, cut number 10.
We have fought this issue in America for over 400 years. That's how long it's been since slavery came to our shores. And the racism that followed from it, was part of it, is still very much alive in America and seen in video after video. And these younger people are telling us once and for all, change it, grown-ups. You're supposed to be in charge. You're supposed to have the authority. So what we say on the Democratic side is we cannot waste this historic moment, this singular opportunity. Let's not do something that is a token, half-hearted approach. Excuse me.
He called Tim Scott's proposed bill a token, half-hearted approach. Senator Scott, this will take most of the next 3 segments. Senator Scott took to the Senate floor. Let's begin to play cut number 11.
Mr. President, this morning, I woke up this morning, Mr. President, Wednesday morning, June 17th, 2020. For so many Americans, this is just another Wednesday morning. You wake up, you get ready for work. Not in South Carolina. In South Carolina, this Wednesday, June 17th, is the 5th anniversary of when a racist walked into Mother Emanuel Church. And sat through a Bible study for an hour and listened to believers talk about their love of God. And at the end of that Bible study, pulled out the weapon and killed 9 people. So for me, and so many South Carolinians, this is a hard day.
Start right there. I will be back. I'm going to complete Senator Scott's speech. I did not interrupt it. I did not tell you that was Senator Scott struggling to command his emotions because I wanted you to hear them as he got command of himself. And I want you to hear the rest of his remarks, which I will play in the next 2 segments. Dick Durbin ought not to have called Senator Scott's measures a token. Dick Durbin is an idiot. Senator Scott is a noble and an esteemed figure in Washington, D.C., on both sides of the aisle, and his bill should pass immediately. That Democrats are not passing it immediately is because they wish to score political points off of race. Senator Scott wishes to work the problem. I would trust Senator Scott on this, America. And stay tuned, because I'm going to play you the rest of what Senator Scott had to say yesterday. Dick Durbin or no Dick Durbin. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Thursday morning edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Heritage Foundation.
If anybody doubted how strong America is, look at all we've been through in the past few months and understand why we're still standing. We're still standing because we believe in the bonds that bring us together. We believe in freedom and liberty. And we believe that after all we've been through, nothing can defeat us. So let's cheer as America gets ready to rebuild and remake our lives bigger, stronger, better than ever before. Keep it here to find out how. We are the answer. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The president's efforts to reform police and begin that conversation seem to be met by support in a bipartisan way. Here's Van Jones from CNN. This is a guy who very, very critical of the Trump administration, but can often be fair when it comes to issues like the judicial reform, the efforts that this president has embarked upon. And it sounds like even CNN commentator Van Jones was pretty pleased with the president's announcement yesterday.
Well, listen, I think there are two things here. One is the speech and one is the executive order. The executive order is a good thing, and mainly because you saw the support of law enforcement there. That gives you a sense of where the bottom is, where the floor is for reform. And that floor is higher than it has been. There is movement in the direction of a database for bad cops. We've never had a federal database for bad cops. That's why these cops go all over the place doing bad stuff. The idea that you're going to have de-escalators now alongside cops, so you can talk people down and not shoot people down. The chokehold, that's common ground now between Pelosi and Trump. So you see good stuff there.
There's good stuff there. The Republicans are announcing a package that enacts police reform as well. We're having that important movement right now, and it's going to happen. The truth of the matter is you got two sides politically. You got the law and order side, and you've got the face of lawlessness and rioters and looters and violent people.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
And this is really apt for the times that we're living in, okay? I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this letter. He says, my great-great-grandfather was the governor of New Hampshire. His youngest daughter was adopted by the family Key. Frances Scott Key helped her win her inheritance, and she moved from slave Kentucky to free Ohio. She built 4 houses and gave those houses and freedom to her slaves.
Frances Scott Key, who wrote the national anthem, and you're telling me that this woman, who is Jacob's ancestor.
So one of her grandsons died in the Battle of Shiloh. So this is what Jacob says. He says, no white guilt for me. Furthermore, people who say that the national anthem is racist are lying about my abolitionist adoptive families. Now, what's really interesting about this letter, it was accompanied with a photograph, an actual photograph of her grave, and this is what's carved in stone on his great-great-grandmother's grave. Or his
now, hang on, I'm sorry. This is the woman, this is Jacob's ancestor, who you said moved from a slave state to a free state. And what did this woman do again?
She bought 4 houses and she freed her slaves and gave them her houses to live in so that they would not be living in slavery, but they would be free people. Okay? And he sent a photograph, and it's the tombstone of Nancy Ann Sullivan Key Trunnell. That's her name. This is her tombstone. This is literally carved on the tombstone. Okay, here's a picture of it here. What she said to her slaves: "Poor little creatures, you shall never be sold into slavery. I will take you to Ohio, get you houses, and set you free."
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Owen Strand for townhall.com. A call is going out now for the dismantling of the Minneapolis Police Department. The president of the city council said this when asked about what to do in the case of a break-in.
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, it would feel like to already live in that reality where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
There's no doubt that our cities and communities need restoration, including greater peaceful engagement between police and citizens. Yet the idea that wanting protection is privilege is not sound. In fact, it's absurd and won't restore anything. Police who act unjustly are accountable to the rule of law and must be. But there is no need to qualify what a society without police will look like. More harm will surely be done. May coming days bring greater safety and meaningful restoration. I'm Owen Strand.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious
When we were everyone, we were more than just a slice of American.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Yesterday, United States Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, an African-American, took to the floor to talk about the bill that he introduced in criminal reform. Dick Durbin called it a token bill. Senator Scott continued his response after an emotional ingathering about the momentousness of the anniversary of the Mother Emanuel shooting, which approaches.
I'll tell you, Mr. President, that standing on this floor, remembering the words of one of the victim's son, Daniel Simmons Jr. 5 years ago, a Wednesday had passed, 1 week later. And I asked Daniel Simmons Jr., whose father, Daniel Simmons Sr., had been killed in an attempt to start another race war at the home of the Civil War. I asked him, what should I say to the people who will be watching around the country? He said, what I could not believe was please remind them of Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to their purpose. I was standing at those doors on my cell phone. I could not believe the words he was speaking. And in an act of true, unconditional love, he inspired me, he encouraged me, he taught me lessons of strength and courage and mercy our nation needs to remember. And I came to the floor today, Mr. President, to speak about my new bill, the Justice Act, our Republican response to the police reform. And I was sitting in my office when the senator from Illinois talked about the token legislation. On this day, the day that we remember Mother Emanuel Church and the 9 lost lives, my friend, the pastor of the church, Clemente Pinckney, the first person ever to call me a senator, the pastor of that church, a Democrat pastor of that church, says to me, my senator, 2012, December, to reflect back on the fact that I have in my phone today the text from Clemente where I said, are you okay? He didn't answer because he was already dead. To think that on this day, as we try to make sure that fewer people lose confidence in this nation, to have the senator from Illinois refer to this process, this bill, this opportunity to restore hope and confidence and trust from the American people, from African Americans, from communities of color, to call this a token process hurts my soul for my country, for our people. To think that the concept of anti-lynching that's a part of this legislation to be considered a token piece of legislation because perhaps I'm African American and I'm the only one on the side of the aisle. I don't know what he meant, but I can tell you that this day, to have those comments again hurts the soul. To think about how the same year, 2015, Walter Scott, in my hometown of North Charleston, running away from the police, gets shot 5 times in the back. I sponsored legislation then, and I don't remember a single person saying a single thing on that side of the aisle about helping to push forward more legislation on body cameras. But today, this is a token piece of legislation. Because I think it's important that we stand up and be counted and make sure that we have more resources available for every single officer to have a body camera. Because as we saw in Georgia with Mr. Arbery, had it not been caught on video, in Walter Scott's case, had it not been caught on video, in George Floyd's case, had it not been caught on video, we might be in a different place. But on the other side, they're wanting to race bait on tokenism. While this legislation will provide resources for body cameras, for anti-lynching, for de-escalation training. But no, we can't concern ourselves with the families I sat with at the White House yesterday and in my office yesterday. Instead, we want to play politics because this is 2020 and we're far more concerned about winning elections than we are having a serious conversation on reform in this country. No, we would rather have a conversation about tearing this country apart, making it a binary choice between law enforcement and communities of color, instead of working for the American people, bringing the reforms to the table so that we have a chance to balance this nation and direct her towards due north. No, that's too much to ask on June the 17th, 5 years later. I started this conversation on body cameras in 2015, on the Walter Scott Notification Act in 2015. But no, we want to have a political conversation. I reject that. I reject that. And I will tell you that I believe that my friends on the other side of the aisle are serious about police reform. There's just some that are more interested in scoring political points than they actually are getting a result. Not the majority of them. The majority of them have the same heart that we have for the American people. That's where we should be focusing our attention on. Not the color of my skin, not tokens. Cool when you're out in the public. I get it all the time on Twitter. I'm used to it. But on this day, my heart aches for my state. My heart aches for my uncle's church for 50 years before he passed. And so I'm a little riled up. I sit here quietly trying to pass good legislation that was based on the House bill because I knew that if I wanted a chance to get something done, we had to do it in a bipartisan fashion. I'm not running for anything. I'm not up for re-election. I'm not trying to support someone for their victory. I'm simply saying to the families I met with yesterday at the White House without a camera, and in my office yesterday without a camera, I hear you. We see you. You are not simply sitting there silent. We are working on serious, tangible, measurable results. Why is that not enough? Why can't we just disagree on the 3 or 4 items that we disagree upon? Why can't I say what I've been saying, which is that the House bill is, in fact, the blueprint for some progress? It goes too far for me in some areas, but yes, I like the concept of more information. This is a good thing. The House does it, we do it. That's a good thing. I like the concept of more training. The House does it, we do it. I like the fact that we're looking for a way to ban chokeholds. We do it by taking money from different departments. They do it in a different fashion. But we're about 90% there. But where do we go? Where do we go? People wonder why our country's so divided, because it's so easy to walk on this floor and say token and send the same race-baiting message that we've heard for a very long time. But if you're a Democrat, hey, it's okay. That's not ever okay. It's not okay to say to our kids, you can't think what you want to think and be who you want to be. If you're not in line with one place and the way they think, this bad news, then you're a sellout. What message do you send to kids? I'm going to be okay. But what message are we sending to kids? They're our country. That you can't be taught just to think. We have to teach you how to think. That's the kind of conclusion that is wrong. It's toxic. It's pushing our country towards an implosion that is avoidable. That's why I started my legislative day today with remembering Mother Emanuel. It's why I read my Bible next because I knew I needed a little extra strength. And it's why I turned immediately to my first interview trying to talk about police reform. Because as a guy who's been stopped 18 times in the years of the 2000s, I take it seriously. Being stopped 7 times in a single year, being stopped this year, being stopped last November, being stopped coming into the Senate with my pen on. Sure, I get it. But I don't point fingers at the other side saying that they're just not serious about the issue. It's just not what we should do. I assume that everybody should be serious about the issue. But Mr. President, I got to tell you, it's with a heavy heart. It's with a heavy heart that I believe that had we had more money for body cameras, we'd be in a different position today than we were in 2015, but I didn't have anybody who wanted to have this conversation, or at least we didn't have this conversation. I believe that there are good people of good intent on the other side of the aisle. I think there are good people of good intent on our side of the aisle. I think the fact of the matter is that most Americans are tired of Republicans and Democrats talking about Republicans and Democrats. I think most Americans are tired of us talking about election outcomes and polls. What about me is what they are saying. I'm suggesting that this bill, the Justice Act, is a serious nationwide effort tackling the issues of police reform, accountability, and transparency. It is grounded in bipartisan principles because I believe the other side has some stuff we have to hear and that our side has some stuff they need to hear. And if we do that, we'll have the votes to have a real debate next week on this bill. But if we don't do that, we'll just talk about scoring political points, and you'll go on MSNBC or CNN, we'll go on Fox, and everybody will have their chatter, and more people in the communities of color will have less confidence in the institutions of power and authority in this nation because we missed the moment.
Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, laying the wood to not just Dick Durbin, but to the Democrats and to the media and to everyone else who will not take this issue seriously. And hats off to Senator Scott. Well and truly delivered. He overcame the emotion of the moment after being called a token. Good for Senator Scott. Hey, it's that time of the morning where I take my relieffactor.com. Told you I missed a step yesterday, so I got to ankle that's about the size of a softball. But I'll get out there and hobble around if it's not raining because of my relieffactor.com. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega. That would be Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I take it every morning at this hour, and it makes a difference every day, and I think you ought to do it as well. And I do that because doctors agree that the body doesn't get everything it needs from a multivitamin. Never stop taking what your doctor prescribes if you've got particular needs, but supplement it. Put those things into your body that your body craves, those 4 supplements. Easy to take, easy to open, best designed product I've ever seen. And it costs $19.95 to get a 3-week supply to try it for yourself. I'll be right back. Michael Oren joins me from Israel as annexation talk picks up there. We'll talk about the specifics when we return to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Pay attention to Jake Tapper being an unbiased, objective journalist. Video cut 3.
There is one group of generals, however, that the president is standing firm with. Dead, racist losers. More specifically, the Confederate commanders, after whom 10 Army bases are currently named. Days ago, the Pentagon said that they wanted to begin a bipartisan conversation about renaming these 10 bases, but the president shut that down. He wants to continue to honor them.
The president is standing with dead racist losers? You mean Democrats, right? Because those statues are of Democrats. Those army bases are named after Southern military leaders. But here's the question, Jake. Did you say that about Obama? Did you say that about Clinton? Because guess what? Fort Bragg was Fort Bragg for a long time. Those statues to Southern generals, correct me if I'm wrong, but they weren't erected in the last 3.5 years, you hack. They've been there for decades. But now this president is standing with racist losers. Why wasn't Obama standing with racist losers? Why wasn't the former governor of Arkansas accused of standing with racist losers by you? Because you're not a journalist. You're a hack. You are the personification of fake news.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Abusive, engaged in brutality. I'm all for reforming that, but the fact of the matter is that the current narrative is not supported by fact. Blacks are actually current narrative is not supported by fact. Blacks are actually slightly less likely to be shot by cops than are white suspects similarly situated. Mm-hmm. There have been several studies on this. Maybe the most notable one is the Harvard study, where the researcher, Roland Fryer, who's also black, fully expected, from everything I understand, I don't know him, but I've read accounts of his study, fully expected that what he was going to find pursuant to his data was that it would support the narrative that blacks are being disproportionately shot by cops. And the data showed that's not true. Now, it wasn't overwhelming. There was only a slight number of more whites being shot than blacks by cops. But there are other studies. The National Academy of Science, I believe, is the study that has whites shot at a twice greater rate than blacks similarly situated. And there are other studies similar to that.
Keep up.
Welcome back, America. Still no news out of Hawaii, where Secretary of State Mike Pompeo continues his conversations with his counterpart from China, other than what I updated you on. I'm joined now by Dr. Michael Oren from Israel, former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I am fine, Hugh.
Would you update us on the annexation debate in terms that the American public will understand, so they understand the decisions being made there and the decisions that will come here as a consequence?
Well, not untypically. The annexation debate is being presented in very black and white terms. Those who are against it saying it's going to be a disaster for our relations with the Palestinians, with our relations with the Jordanians, with our relations with the Democratic Party. There's going to be an upheaval in the West Bank, security ramifications, and ultimately, by annexing great numbers of Palestinians, we will create a situation where it'll threaten our future as a democratic and Jewish state and make it very difficult to defend Israel internationally against charges of apartheid in the West Bank. That sounds pretty bleak, right?
Yes.
But there's another side to it. There's another side to it, which is this, that the Trump peace plan is the best peace plan we've ever seen, certainly I've ever seen. And the only way to keep that peace plan alive is by upholding the principle that anybody who leaves the table pays a price. Now, the Palestinians have left the table repeatedly. They left it under Clinton. They left it under Bush. They left it under Obama. Rather than paying a price, they got paid. They got rewarded. But under this president, every time they've left the table, they paid a price. The president recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, cut funding to the Palestinians all over the place. So now the Palestinians have left the table after the publication of the peace plan. There has to be some reaction from the parties to show that the peace plan is serious, or else it dies. It dies on the table. I've seen it happen again and again over the last 30 years. So maybe there was a way of getting, say, the Saudis or the Emiratis to recognize Israel, to establish some type of level of diplomatic recognition that would achieve the same purpose. That has not happened, unfortunately, and so there doesn't seem to be much alternative. And then the internal political situation, where the greatest opponents, at least in Israel, to the annexation are not from the left wing, but from the right wing, because they know that the quid pro quo for that annexation is Israel's recognition and acceptance of the Trump peace plan, which in one form or another calls for a two-state solution.
Now, Ambassador Oren, yesterday in D.C., a senior Emirati official gave a speech that suggested that the annexation moves would, in fact, rupture the ongoing approach of diplomatic relations with the Gulf states. What did you make of that?
I think he's being honest, but I would say to him in an honest and friendly way, okay, you don't want this to happen. What are you willing to do? Because something has to move here. Because if nothing happens, I think you agree with me, Hugh, if nothing happens, then the peace plan's dead. It's like every other peace plan, where the Palestinians got a veto, they said no, and everyone went home. They could do it again this time, but the only way around it is if the Palestinians realize that if they say no, other Arabs are going to say yes. And they're going to be left in the dust, the Palestinians. So I would say to the Emiratis, okay, you don't want Israel annexed, establish a legation. It doesn't even have to be an embassy, a legation. Let us open a legation. Let's have direct flights. Let's have business contacts, open business contacts. There's many things that can be done here. I don't see it happening.
Why would that explain to the unknowing? Why would something short of recognition move the process forward?
Well, first it would show the Palestinians if they don't move, they're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
That's a price they get. That's punishment for them. It also shows the Israeli public that there's a dividend. There's a peace dividend. And yes, there may be a recognition of some type of Palestinian state. It won't be a Bavarian type state with full sovereignty, but a state. It'll involve territorial sacrifices for the Israelis. And, we've made territorial sacrifices in the past. We didn't get peace. All we did was get tens of thousands of rockets. So you've got a very skeptical public here, justifiably. So you have to say, here is a benefit. Guess what? You can get on a plane and do business in Abu Dhabi.
That makes sense. Okay. Now, in the Times of Israel, it says the Prime Minister has presented Benny Gantz with annexation options, including only a symbolic move. Would you explain to me does the Prime Minister have the votes to move unilaterally if he wants to move unilaterally towards one or the other of these options he's presented?
Well, he has like a doomsday button, which is this, that if Benny Gantz says no to these options, and I don't know if I entirely believe the Times of Israel article. I don't think the Prime Minister is looking for a symbolic annexation. I think he's looking for a substantive one. But having said that, if Benny Gantz says no, then the Prime Minister can say, well, we tried with blue and white and Benny Gantz. They're not playing ball with us. So we'll break apart the government and we'll go to, guess what, elections. And according to the recent polls, Benny Gantz and Blue and White have nosedived in the polls. Bibi has gone up to over 40 seats. And so if the elections happen quickly, and this they do happen quickly within 3 months, you could see the Prime Minister achieving a sweeping victory without anybody really in opposition. There's no opposition to him today.
And do you think that's what's going to happen, Michael Oren?
Well, according to the Israeli pundits, I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's definitely an option. I think they'll go for some type of level of annexation.
Okay, because Benny Gantz knows the same math, right? So if he knows the same math, he picks from.
It's existential for him.
Yeah, it is. I get it. Michael Oren, always a pleasure. You make it very clear, at least to me, maybe not the Steelers fans, but I appreciate it. Coming right back, America. Hour number 2 coming up on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Have you actually entered Chaz?
I entered, I brought my passport, and went through the border, got into Chaz, did my thing, took off. So yes, I entered the Republic of Chaz, now known as CHOP. I think they realized the name Chaz was so stupid and sounded like a this is sweet jazz coming at you. And they changed it to CHOP. It sounds rougher and tougher.
CHOP?
Yes.
It's now called CHOP?
CHOP.
Is that the fastest change of a country's name in history?
Yeah, I think it took a long time for Rhodesia
to go to Burma to Myanmar like it took centuries. This is remarkable. So you went to Chaz/CHOP. Is it now, in all seriousness, can anybody enter?
Yeah. So anybody can walk in. There's this notion of doing ID checks. That doesn't really exist. Look, the truth is that the veneer of this place, and we'll call it Chaz, because it's a funnier name, sounds funnier on the radio, but the veneer of this place is, in fact, one of like a carnival party atmosphere, right? There's free food, and there's kids, and there's people walking around and having a good time and blowing bubbles. When you walk in, it does seem like a street fair. To be honest, that is what it looks like. But like anything on the left, if you begin to just scratch the veneer a little bit, the ugliness starts to come out, which is obviously what I do for a living. That's how I make that's how I make my bones. And that's what I did, scratch the veneer. And you then saw the ugliness starting to come out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
With the news about the GOP convention essentially being moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where we attend to go for the broadcast because we cover every Republican convention over the years. Jacksonville is a hot spot. Florida is seeing an increase in infections. And of course, there's a gigantic debate over whether or not the increase in infections is resulting from the increase in testing. Is there actually more infection? What do you make of the rallies where people are shoulder to shoulder, thousands and thousands of people? So all of that is sort of in the mix, but they had a prediction that the economists from Dow Jones expected that there would be an 8.8 percentage point increase in retail sales for the month of May. Well, retail sales shattered those already lofty expectations. This was just released. Retail sales alone powered 16.8% higher from the month previously. Again, more than double the estimate of 8% from the Dow Jones economists, reversing the plunge of 16.4% from a month ago. Clothing and accessory stores reported the biggest percentage gain, 188%. Sporting goods, hobby, musical instruments, bookstores rose 88.2%. Now, all of this added to an already upbeat mood from Wall Street. And it is, I suspect, of those who think that Donald Trump will be defeated by Joe Biden on November the 3rd.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Okay, let's talk about your book. It's called For God and for Country, The Christian Case for Trump. So what is the case?
Well, I wrote the book not so much to defend Donald Trump. I wrote the book to defend people who love God and who love their country and who are serious in their faith, who have been pilloried, smeared, insulted. They've been accused of being spiritual frauds and hypocrites, of selling out the gospel for 30 pieces of silver, for trading the integrity of their faith in Jesus Christ for a few items on their public policy agenda. And I felt that the decision they made in 2016 was a difficult decision. They had two imperfect candidates, one of whom, Donald Trump, had a background as a playboy, as tabloid fodder, as formerly pro-choice, and as someone who had formerly supported Democrats. And then they had the unspeakable alternative on the other side of Hillary Clinton. And I think when Donald Trump committed to them that he would be pro-life, that he would appoint a replacement for Antonin Scalia from a list of 21 outstanding originalist jurists that he released in advance, and when he promised to defend Israel and to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, or failing that, renegotiate it, I think they made a tough but right call. And I think given his record since then, the word that he has kept, not just to them, but to the American people, I think their choice has been vindicated.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'm very impressed. You need to follow this man and his company. It's egardwatches.com, E-G-A-R-D watches.com. They're on Twitter as well, Egard Watch Co. Mr. Shrilovich, tell us, what are the consequences? What have happened to you since you made that public statement?
You know, it's interesting. YouTube restricted the video right away, which was surprising. But people are still able to see it if they have a YouTube account. I don't know how restriction works. There's been some negative emails coming in, but, you know, we're lucky. We've gotten so much positive feedback from people in law enforcement and their families and people who support the police. And I think that there's a silent majority that is just scared to speak up. And so I hope that people see that there is a platform to speak up and you can do it.
When we see businesses in one night in Minneapolis, 170 businesses torched or looted or broken into, when we see that on America's streets, what is your message to the people who are afraid? We have 139 days until the election.
Yeah, I got you loud and
cancel
clear.
culture in full force. They're going after conservative media personalities like Tucker Carlson. Even on the left, the opinion page editor of the New York Times is fired because he dares to publish a piece from a Republican senator. You're a businessman.
All right.
You're not a politician. Explain the stakes involved in the current situation that you're witnessing.
I mean, you got a tie on.
Well,
Why
you
not
kind of
me?
touched it on the nail. I'm not a politician. Our politicians aren't doing anything about it. So it's our job at this point to do something. Who else will? And I know fear exists. People have to understand you can be in a state of fear and still take action for what's truth. And I really do believe that the truth, inevitably, if spoken, will prevail. It can shut down any amount of lies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside of the Beltway where it's rainy today, and I am, however, deluged with John Bolton stories, and I'm joined by General David Deptula, Lieutenant General, retired United States Air Force. Good morning, General. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Very good. Like you said, it's kind of rainy outside, but we could use a break from the heat.
And it's going to be a long day. Look, I am reading the Wall Street Journal assessment of John Bolton's book. I want to read you a paragraph of this. And it's by Ambassador Bolton. He has an op-ed in the Journal. The real question is, what does Trump do about China's threat? His advisors are badly fractured intellectually. The administration has panda huggers like Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, confirmed free traders like National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow, China hawks like Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, lead trade negotiator Robert Lighthizer, and White House trade advisor Peter Navarro. The Pentagon is not mentioned. What do you and the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is meeting with his Chinese counterpart in Hawaii as we speak, actually, although they might be taking a break and taking a sleep. What do you think we ought to be doing vis-a-vis China, General?
Well, it's an extraordinarily large question, an extraordinarily important one. From a military perspective, let me offer that the military command with the responsibility for overseeing options for dealing with a variety of contingencies in the Indo-Pacific theater is the Pacific Command. You is not a political one, but one that is in the job jar, if you will, of the military, and that is to look at the spectrum of options that may be employed or provided to the nation's civilian leadership in the event that some sort of military contingency erupts, all the way from a incursion over a law of the sea exercise, or an event that goes sour in an air surveillance operation that's conducted in international airspace. Those are all lower end elements, all the way up to what happens if China takes extraordinarily aggressive action, such as assaulting Taiwan or the Senkakus, or other mischief. So, that's not a satisfying answer that you want in terms of what the civilian leadership should do, but just be aware that the military is out there 24/7 looking at how do we plan and prepare for operations in the event that we're called to back up a national security position that the United States stands on.
No, General, yesterday I wrote a piece in the Post saying that within the West Wing, and it's very well sourced, they expect to request at least $42 billion in Phase 4 rescue funding, a supplemental, to make up for the impacts of COVID. Some of that is quite simply cost overruns because various factories producing various things had to shut down, and that costs money. I think it's $12 billion of the $42 billion. But they also want a Virginia-class submarine. They want a bunch of Coast Guard ships. They want to get the Oliver Hazard Perry class back at sea, the Ticonderoga cruisers back at sea. They want to extend the lifespans of various things. I heard a lot of reaction to that, including that it wasn't enough money, that the Pentagon has a disagreement over what they want. What do you think they ought to get out of that supplemental? And what are you hearing about what's at the top of the wish list of the Pentagon, if anything?
Well, again, like we discussed a couple of shows ago, Hugh, the coronavirus has had a significant impact in the context of what the Department of Defense has been doing, what they've been procuring, and it has slowed down the wheels of acquisition inside the military. So, I hesitate to get into the specifics. We talked about F-35, for example. I mean, the COVID process and the fact that, they've got thousands of sub-suppliers and all of those have been affected. This is an impact that's occurred across the defense community. So those programs need to be taken care of. I mean, and if in fact we want to reap the benefits of the investment that was made in the funds that were appropriated by Congress last year. So the Department of Defense expects to see about a 3-month delay across the majority of its major defense acquisition program portfolio. So that needs to be reimbursed. I'll leave it up to Ellen Lord, the Pentagon's top acquisition official, to identify the specific programs that have been struggling. But there has been a slowdown in the shipyards to an extent. Aviation is actually the most highly impacted sector that we have right now.
On the list that I was given by my friends in the West Wing, they say they want money for 12 F-35Bs for the Marine Corps and 12 F-35As for the Air Force. These are variations on the F-35. And, I duly reported that because it's a little bit of a scoop. But how do you actually accelerate production when the lines are down? What does that mean in the real world if they got a dozen F-35Bs ordered up, and that's got a special name with the Lightning Bolt or something like that, and then a dozen F-35As? What actually happens?
Well, there is more capacity at the line in Fort Worth than is actually being used.
Oh,
in the Air Force, in the Air Force's case, they're only asking for 48 F-35s a year. The original plan was to build over 100 per year. There's capacity to probably put out 80 to 100 per year. So that money could go to increase the production capacity, or it could simply go to replace lost cost over time and be done in a more gradual way. So there's a variety of options that are out there.
What is the difference, General, between the F-35A and the F-35B? I think it's vertical launch versus takeoff, but in terms of range and lethality.
Yeah, well, there's a huge difference in terms of the designs of those two aircraft. Like you say, the F-35B is a vertical takeoff aircraft and is an engineering marvel. The F-35A is lighter because it doesn't have the same complexity with the engine. So it has a bit more range and a lot more payload because, if you're planning on a pure vertical takeoff, weight becomes a very important concern. So those are the principal differences between the two aircraft, but they're still stealthy. They still fly the same speed. Range is a little bit less on the B model, but remember, it can take off vertically. So you can put a lot of them. You can expand for example, the Navy talks about having 12 aircraft carriers. It really has about 23. If you include the amphibs in there that the Marines put F-35Bs on. So you can expand the number of platforms on which that aircraft can operate off of.
General, excuse the civilians' ignorance, but do the Air Force train to fly the F-35B ever? Do they learn the vertical takeoff measures?
No, they don't, because the only variant of the F-35 that the Air Force flies is the A model, which is a conventional takeoff aircraft, which, like I said, has advantages because it can carry greater payload and it has greater range. Now, there are one or two, there are exchange officers between the Air Force and the Marine Corps. So there are some Air Force officers that go out and, they exchange and they fly with the Marines. So they do learn how to fly the F-35B. But in general, no. The Air Force.
Okay, so again, a civilian's question. You've talked to me before about the strategic necessity of having a lot of different places at which to put payloads. Assuming for the moment that F-35s of either variant can carry a strategic payload, whatever their weight, meaning nuclear weapons, doesn't it make sense for the Air Force to have some vertical takeoffs and the capacity to put them all over the place because that increases the target range dramatically or the target sites dramatically?
Well, this is the essence of the question is, what is the significance and is there value to having a vertical takeoff capability? We could talk about this for an hour, but guess what, Hugh? There are over 18,000 runways around the world that have over 6,000 feet of concrete on them. So where is it that I'm not going to be provide access to a runway?
Good question, but of course, next week I'm going to ask you, if China has 6,001 hypersonics, don't you really want to be able to move them, right?
I don't know. Say that again.
If China has 6,001 hypersonics and they can pre-target 6,000 runways, don't you? That'll be the question for next week, General. We'll come back to that. I appreciate. Go ahead.
That's still not 18,000, Hugh.
All right. Okay. I'll be right. 18,001 hypersonic. I'll be right back with General Deptula next week to continue the conversation. Thank you, General. Don't go anywhere, America. More Tim Scott coming up on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Job Creators Network Foundation.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
A lot of people wanted to misunderstand it and say he promoted violence, but you have just shown the world that that's not true.
And you know, Alvita, what I hear is he evolved on the issue of violence, later on realized it was an effective tool. To that, I say BS. I want to know what you thought of that.
It's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King Jr. has been nonviolent his whole life. As a matter of fact, out of his 3 siblings, he was the one most likely, when anything else was happening in the community, he would be the one to always remind them that the best way to handle that was violence.
Now, Alvita, I've never asked you this, and if you don't want to respond to it, I've got no problem. We can move on. But was there friction between your uncle and Jesse Jackson?
There was friction. A lot of people do know it. Most people didn't. However, Jesse was more black power, and Martin Luther King was nonviolence, and so they did have discussions of that sort. Jesse probably a little younger than Martin, of course, Uncle ML, but my uncle, Martin Luther King Jr., was promoting violence, not only as a method, because remember, he was a Baptist preacher.
Right.
And because he was a Baptist preacher and he followed Jesus Christ, some of that came from that as well.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The Supreme Court decision yesterday is mind-boggling. That 2 so-called conservatives joined in it is very disconcerting. Even if you agree with the issue of you don't discriminate against transgender and gays, etc., they made law. They didn't interpret law. You argued, or you or your organization argued at the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Yes. Exactly. John Bursch, one of my colleagues here at ADF, actually argued in the Harris Funeral Home case.
Was he surprised? What did he predict?
Yeah, we all were. We thought at a minimum it would be 5-4 the other way, and possibly even going further the other way. And the reason for that, it was just an issue about what they call statutory construction. In other words, what does the law mean? You don't have to get into the current issues of marriage and sexual orientation to say, what did the law mean in 1964? So that's we're expecting to be what we thought was an easy result by the Supreme Court.
Wow. So now let's talk reality. In Connecticut, every record but one in high school girls racing is held by biological men who identify as women. Will that now be the law of the land?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Owen Strand for townhall.com. A call is going out now for the dismantling of the Minneapolis Police Department. The president of the city council said this when asked about what to do in the case of a break-in.
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
There's no doubt that our cities and communities need restoration, including greater peaceful engagement between police and citizens. Yet the idea that wanting protection is privilege is not sound. In fact, it's absurd and won't restore anything. Police who act unjustly are accountable to the rule of law and must be. But there is no need to qualify what a society without police will look like. More harm will surely be done. May coming days bring greater safety and meaningful restoration. I'm Owen Strand.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious freedom is being violated.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Big news of the day, John Bolton's book. But I don't think it's going to be more than a one-day story because the New York Times could not find anything to sink its teeth into in its review. They don't much like John Bolton, and their distaste for John Bolton overcame the few paragraphs that can be turned into salacious headlines. I haven't read the book. I won't read the book till it's cleared. I'm never, ever going to give away classified information on this radio show. He says it's not in it. The White House says it is. I'll wait and see. Tim Scott gave an impassioned speech on the Senate floor. I played most of it last hour. I want you to hear the last 2.5 minutes of it right now.
It's the moment. We missed it 5 years ago. We don't have to miss it now. Mr. President, as you know, I am not really into theatrics. I don't run towards microphones. I've had a lot of them this last 7 days. I don't talk a lot in conference because why say what other people are saying and they probably said it better. I don't demonize the other side because I know that in order to get anything done in this conference, in this committee, in this Senate, you got to have 60 votes. And plus, if you have a grievance with your brother, talk to him. Talk to him. I've tried to do that. Mr. President, as I'm sure I've run over my time, let me just say that to the families I sat down with yesterday, they don't think working on body cameras is a token experience. They don't think sitting down with the President of the United States with their tears filling their eyes, running down their cheeks, talking about their lost loved ones is a token experience. The law enforcement officers in that meeting with those families do not believe that having a serious conversation about police reform is a token experience. They don't believe that co-responders for the one man who was in the room whose son was having a mental episode, who was shot on the scene, he doesn't think this is a token experience. Shame on us. Shame on us if we are unwilling to have a serious conversation about a serious issue that, in my opinion, is a greater threat to this nation than perhaps anything we've seen because we've never solved it, because we're all having political points. That's wrong. It's just not right.
Senator Tim Scott on the floor yesterday. Donald Trump was on Hannity last night talking about the latest police shooting, the man who was killed, Rashard Brooks. This is the president talking to Donald Trump, cut number 17.
Well, the George Floyd case, nothing has to be said. I watched that. I couldn't really watch it for that long a period of time. It was over 8 minutes, and who could watch that? But it doesn't get any more obvious or doesn't get any worse than that. And I think it's a different kind of a case. And that man has some big problems. There's no question about it, the police officer, what he did. And I haven't met any, because I deal with law enforcement all the time, and I just left a big group of the top sheriffs and law enforcement people in the country, and nobody was sticking up for what he did. The event that took place yesterday I thought it was a terrible situation, but you can't resist a police officer. And, if you have a disagreement, you have to take it up after the fact. It was a very sad, very, very sad thing. And look, you take a look, it was out of control. The whole situation was out of control. I heard today and just got a report that the police officer's lawyer said that he heard a sound like a gun, like a gunshot, and he saw a flash in front of him. So that's an interesting, I don't know that I would have necessarily believed that, but I will tell you that's a very interesting thing, and maybe that's so. They're going to have to find out. It's up to justice right now. It's going to be up to justice. I hope he gets a fair shake, because police have not been treated fairly in our country. They have not been treated fairly. But, again, you can't resist a police officer like that, and they ended up in a very terrible disagreement, and look at the way it ended. Very bad, very bad.
Oh, that officer has, in fact, been charged with felony murder, so the prosecutors do not believe he had no choice. The prosecutors do not believe the officer had no choice. I'll be back with more. I'm going to talk more China with Dr. Jonathan Ward, who's a very serious realist about China. Stay tuned, America.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The mayor of New York announced back in May that the city would hire 1,000 contact tracers. They make about $60,000 a year, and they go around and make sure that they keep track of the spread of the disease. If somebody has contracted the virus, where do they go? Where have they been? Well, apparently the mayor's office has instructed these contract tracers not to ask whether anyone who has tested positive for the disease recently attended a demonstration. That's right. They are literally saying that instead they'll ask COVID positive individuals general questions to help them recall contacts, but no person, according to the mayor's spokesman, Avery Cohen, no person will be asked proactively if they attended a protest. Well, I bet you they'll be asking a bunch of Trump supporters if they go to Tulsa where they've been, huh? Insanity. Insanity. All of it has been insane.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Folks, welcome back. I'm talking to Charlie Kirk. Charlie, this president, seriously, I mean, the other day he held a Bible in front of St. John's Church, and they piled on as though he had held up Mein Kampf. It's just the most bizarre. We're living in the strangest times.
I look at President Trump storm Lafayette Park with total open air. The first time I've seen a president do that in my lifetime, holding the book that built Western society, reclaiming the church that was trying to be burnt by the arsonists, holding it up and saying, this book matters. This book is what we have to get back to. I'm going to proclaim it. It was the hero's journey right across that park. And I said, this is beautiful. This will bring America together. This will be terrific. Who could miss the imagery? And then I watched my Twitter feed, and which I try not to do too much, and the cable news, and people say, how dare he hold up the Bible? And I said, this is really not good. And I wish I had better words than that, Eric. And usually I do, but this is so troubling, the direction this is headed. And this is more than Orwellian. I mean, this is something where you have pathological ideologues that are now committed to destroying the opposition at all costs. And Trump has brought them to this point. We call it Trump derangement syndrome. And I think there's some truth to that, but I think it's even deeper and more sinister than that. This is now American destruction syndrome, where at all costs, they want to see our country be totally deconstructed. And so the good news of Trump is it's exposed their radicalism. The bad news is that if he loses, these radicals now have full license to be who they say they are, because their masks have now been unmasked.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Why were they complaining, Carlos?
Because the Trump flag was still on my rod holder on display with the American
Good morning.
Yeah. So they said you have to take it down?
Yeah. They said you have to take it down, and they even offered to come take it down because I said I'm sick in bed. I'll get it tomorrow. But they were
fantastic.
They were relentless. So finally, after 3 days, I went out there and took the flag down. And I was, pretty much annoyed that I couldn't hang my flag on my boat. And it's only a 3x5 flag. It's not like it's obnoxiously huge. But I went ahead and I contacted the Coast Guard, and I had to document the boat. So I
You
did
got
all the
it.
paperwork,
That's no problem.
legally to name the boat
Okay,
Trump.
thanks so much.
And I got that name secured and done in 24 hours. And then I had my buddy at Atlas Signs, Jimmy. He came up with a good design, went back and forth, and I approved it, and he had it wrapped within 3 days.
So you changed the name. So they said, got to take the flag down. So you changed the name of your boat to Trump, and then Jimmy at Atlas Signs wraps it for you in the Trump flag.
Absolutely, and his wraps by Nate is that guy who actually did the wrapping, but Atlas Sign actually made the actual
wraps by Nate. Okay, and then you roll back with the boat. What happened to your association?
So that's the video that went so viral with the president posting it. I came in because I always come in playing the national anthem, whether I leave a marina or I come in. So I came in playing the national anthem and spun the boat around and parked it, and then all hell broke loose.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. As we speak, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, is meeting in Hawaii with his Chinese counterpart. So my next guest is a very timely one. Dr. Jonathan D.T. Ward came to my attention via my friend Matt Lewis's podcast, and it was arresting hearing his experience. He has now got his PhD from Oxford. He has set up the Atlas organization to study the rise of China. And he has a brand new book out, which I would encourage all of you to get, China's Vision of Victory. I'm reading it on my iPad, which is always unfortunate because I can't make marginal notes. Dr. Ward, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Great to speak to you. Where do we find you this morning?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm at home in Arlington, Virginia.
Well, we are both in the rainy Beltway. Dr. Ward, you began the podcast with Matt Lewis by telling him your experience. And I know some people may have heard that. Most people probably haven't. Would you explain to people how you came to be a China-India specialist?
Absolutely. So I started with foreign languages as an undergrad. I learned Russian and Chinese at Columbia, and then spent the first 5 years out of college living out of a backpack in China, India, Russia, Latin America, and the Middle East, learning other languages too, including Arabic and a bunch of Romance languages, Indonesian, things like that. And wound up at Oxford doing my PhD initially on Russia-China relations, but then moved into China-India. But during my years of backpacking in Asia, it was everything from going across the South China Sea in an Indonesian cargo ship or multiple Indonesian cargo ships to going around Xinjiang, which today is the region where there are 1 million people in concentration camps, going through Tibet, hiding from the Chinese military in the back of trucks, and staying in very remote villages all over China and all over the region. So that gave me a perspective on the country that had much more to do with total immersion among regular people. I mean, listening to how people in villages, to truck drivers, to people owning small businesses in remote areas and such, how they saw the world, how they were being told by the Communist Party what their future was, what their destiny was, what their past and what their present all meant. So I got a level of immersion that I think doesn't usually come for people that have been engaging with China over the years as business people or scholars or students. It was that sort of on the ground nature of being in China and in many other countries that gave me a sense that this place had a very different view of the world and a very different view of the future. And
Now,
ultimately,
Dr. Ward, I've got friends who are deeply embedded in China politics, and I read as much as I can. Dr. Kissinger on China, Graham Allison, The Thucydides Trap, Michael Pillsbury, The 100-Year Marathon. You name it, I try and read it, but I just don't know China. I don't know it at the village level. Like some of my, for example, Christian friends who run missionary operations there very quietly with the acquiescence of the state. And they tell me the village is very different from the city, and the city is very different from the super city, and they're all very different from Beijing. Is that consistent with your experience?
Sure, I think there's something to that. But one of the issues that I think really matters is that the Communist Party does have a sort of information hold over the entire country. So I remember being out in very remote villages, and there'd be a single loudspeaker, and it was broadcasting, whatever the worldview of the party really was. So, when I would go around in the Xi Jinping years and listen to people telling me how they wanted to go to war with their neighbors, go to war with Japan, with Vietnam, with the Philippines, and things like that. I mean, this really is the party speaking. I was very astonished. I was like, where did people get this point of view? But of course, it's how the party talks in the language.
Well, we are waking up now to the fact that we've been asleep for 30 years. John Bolton, in his new book, is getting a lot of headlines for various accounts of the president's idiosyncrasies and not being informed, et cetera. But the heart of it is that the administration is split between panda huggers, free traders, and China hawks. And, to me, it ought to be split between people who are smart about China and those who are not. And I'm not sure there are a lot of people outside of the National Security Council who really have a clear-eyed vision of what President Xi or General Secretary Xi's vision is. What is your understanding of General Secretary Xi's vision for China?
Well, Xi Jinping wants to complete the vision that was set out by the founders of the People's Republic, by Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai and all the others. And what that is for China to become the world's dominant power. And Xi sees himself as a person who's in a position to complete that. So they have this idea that they're going to dominate the world by the year 2049. It's a symbolic date, but really all of this takes shape in the next decade. I mean, this is the important decade. I mean, this is the time when they see themselves surpassing America economically, ultimately technologically, and then militarily. And then they'll use that essentially to exert power across their region, to turn that region into a base for global power and ultimately to rule the world. So Xi sees himself as the person to put China on the glide path to supremacy.
When you say to rule the world, do they want tribute or control?
Both.
Would you expand on what does that mean for the United States? I mean, people who are listening in their cars saying, what does that mean to me?
It means that we would ultimately be a broken nation. We'd be a nation that was not in a position to resist China's will. I mean, you look at the way they exert control in a place like Xinjiang or Tibet, where they have people in concentration camps, where they use their military to keep people under a very, tight clamp. That's the most extreme form. But then you look at the way that they threaten other nations, from the border clashes in India this week to threatening Britain over critical infrastructure projects. I mean, ultimately, and this is a China that is not powerful. That's my point. This is a China that's a shadow of its own ambitions. So you imagine giving them another 10 or 30 years of ascendancy, and then you would see those kinds of practices employed essentially at their leisure.
Before the virus, we had a couple of glimpses of this when China cracked down on the NBA and LeBron James, of all people, capitulated. We had a glimpse of this when Top Gun 2 removed the patch of Taiwan from the flight suit. We had glimpses of market power that made eyebrows go up. Was that the beginning or was that the end of the quiet period of Chinese expansion of power?
I think that they have a period, something they call the period of strategic opportunity. And it was this idea that the year 2000 to 2020 was going to be a period where they could go out and say that it's the peaceful rise of China, it's a win-win, everybody engage economically, and they'd really get everybody's hands into the cookie jar. And at that point, they could start manipulating and showing their true colors once they'd accrued sufficient power. So I think we're at a point where they've accrued sufficient power. They're willing to threaten the United States. I mean, they call the Secretary of State an enemy of mankind. I mean, I know they're meeting today in Hawaii, but and now we have a virus which has killed 100,000 Americans. I mean, they essentially let the thing out and covered it up. And here we are dealing with an economic crisis, which will add trillions of debt to the United States, which will put pressure on our military spending, which is putting pressure on our society in many ways. And they see themselves as in the ascendant here and us in the decline. So I think we're going to see it get a lot harder.
Dr. Ward, have you reached a conclusion yet as to whether the release of the virus was reckless disregard for its danger or a calculated move once it had arisen and crippled China that they had to have the rest of the world at the same starting block as they were?
I think it's unknown as to the thought process behind it, but the situation that we're dealing with is one in which, it's quite clear that it went around the world before they were willing to do anything about it.
Now, there are reports this morning that Beijing is on lockdown. I'm sure you follow the Chinese news because you read you're fluent. I assume in Mandarin. Any of the other Chinese dialect?
Mandarin's the one to know.
And so when you read their newspapers, are they alarmed? Do you think they're experiencing a second wave already that is more significant than their first?
Hard to tell if it's more significant, but certainly, some kind of second wave. And yes, they're trying to position it as though we're ready for this and, we'll be just fine. So that's the narrative has always been one of strength, that there are heroes fighting this and that, China can handle this. And that really, they're even saying that China's system of governance is better prepared for this. And they're using it as an opportunity to attack the democracies, to show the United States in disarray and to say we have the superior system. I think there is some insecurity in what they're saying there, though.
Yeah, when their 70th anniversary of the party came out, I went and saw their 3.5-hour movie that they released in the United States. They're quite confident of what they're doing. Is the United States past the opportunity to counter it, Dr. Ward?
Not at all, but we're going to have to do three things fundamentally. I mean, one, we have to remain the world's top economy. I mean, this is the most important thing. We cannot let this sort of neo-totalitarian dictatorship become the most potent economic force in the world. So the U.S. has to remain top GDP. Two, we have to unite the democracies, the alliance systems. I mean, those all have to be repurposed around the problem of China. So from Europe to Asia, this all has to become a coherent, community for trade, for economics, and for military security that is geared towards the China problem. And third, we're going to have to do something called economic containment. And what that is really to slow down and shut down the growth of the People's Republic of China for as long as the Communist Party is in power. So we're going to have to cut off capital flows to China. We're going to have to cut off technology to China. And we're going to cut off, we have to cut off engagement in any strategic industry. I mean, they have plans. One is called Made in China 2025 to dominate the major industries of the future, from information technology to advanced shipping to aerospace to biotechnology. And we're participating in this because we have to remember that we sent our companies into China to engage with China, and we created this problem. I mean, they were 90% agrarian in the 80s, and now they're competing with us in AI and quantum and all kinds of dual-use technologies. Their military has changed the military balance, and it will be used against us eventually if they continue to grow.
Dr. Ward, a last question, and you've got to come back. I mean, you've just got to come back. I'll be telling people about the book, the vision for China's Vision of Victory, which I'm getting in paperback so I can make notes. But here's the key question. In the Silicon Valley right now, they are selling them the rope, to use Lenin's phrase. Has that stopped? Do you think the United States has effectively stopped that?
We haven't stopped it yet. And also, it's not just Silicon Valley, it's Wall Street, and it's across the Fortune 500, including China and the Bloomberg Barclays Global Aggregate and the MSCI. I mean, this is going to pour billions of dollars into China's state-backed corporations. So at this point, we are funding them, quite deliberately. We have to stop.
Are you a persona non grata in China now, Dr. Ward?
I don't, I'm not going to be going back. I mean, to me, my future's in the United States and in the allied world.
And which think tank are you associated with?
No, I have my own consulting company. So we advise U.S. government and U.S. corporations on strategy towards Asia.
Atlas Organization. What's the website, Dr. Ward?
Correct. atlasorganization.com.
That would make sense. Dr. Ward, keep coming back. I appreciate your spending time with me this morning. Greatly a new guest, and I thank Matt Lewis for introducing you to me. That is, I owe Matt one. Let me now check America, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com on the markets around the world. Hong Kong did not have a good day yesterday. It was down 0.24, just a quarter point, I guess. And Japan was down a half point. As we look, England and Germany are both down about a half point. Quiet everywhere. Yesterday, the stocks were mixed. Dow was down 170, NASDAQ up 14, the S&P down 11. And I have no idea what will happen. Yesterday, the only stock I own, Amazon, was up $25, and who knows if it'll be up 20 or 50 today. I think that the second wave is going to help the Costco's and the Targets, but I know what it has helped. It's helped AndrewandTodd.com because they do mortgages. They lend you the money, and people are buying real estate like they've never bought real estate before because they know at the end of whatever the market revolution is that was underway as a result of the coronavirus, no matter who the winners are or the losers, everyone's going to have to live somewhere. Time to refinance your house. These are the lowest rates in history, the absolute lowest rates in history. And you can only take advantage of Andrew and Todd's rates if you call them at 888-888-1172. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you the money. They will talk to you. The best thing is to go to their website, AndrewandTodd.com, and answer a few questions. AndrewandTodd.com. Don't forget Relief Factor as well. You've got to take it. I took it in the first hour. I remind you about it in hours 2 and 3. I'll remind you about it in hour number 3 as well. It will make the day go better. It will make your commute feel much better. It will make your body feel much better. Support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that accompany getting older. If you do stupid things like miss a step like I did last night, talking to my son who was dropping stuff off and missed a step and, of course, met the ice bag on the ankle. It's fine. I'm not hurt. I'm not hurt. But I took my Relief Factor anyway, because you want to make sure all those minor aches and pains, bumps and bruises get better sooner rather than later. Coming right back, America with Jim Talent. It'll be interesting to get his take on John Bolton's book. Stay tuned.
This is Owen Strand for townhall.com. A call is going out now for the dismantling of the Minneapolis Police Department. The president of the city council said this when asked about what to do in the case of a break-in.
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
There's no doubt that our cities and communities need restoration, including greater peaceful engagement between police and citizens. Yet the idea that wanting protection is privilege is not sound. In fact, it's absurd and won't restore anything. Police who act unjustly are accountable to the rule of law and must be. But there is no need to qualify what a society without police will look like. More harm will surely be done. May coming days bring greater safety and meaningful restoration. I'm Owen Strand.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious freedom is being violated.
Attention business owners. As America gets back to work, will customers know you're there? With little warning, the coronavirus attacked our nation and our well-being in ways we never anticipated. The tragic loss of life, unprecedented economic upheaval, and a shattered sense of security has left many individuals and businesses in shambles. While the aftershocks could be felt for months to come, they may not have to. There is hope for an extraordinary turnaround of your bottom line. But will you be prepared for America's grand reopening? All signs point to the biggest business opportunity of our lifetime, coming as early as this summer. A recent survey of local advertisers shows a 10-point jump in the number of local advertisers who plan to maintain or increase their spending. 1 in 4 businesses expect to spend more in advertising by the end of June, and more than half expect to restart or surge their spending by this summer. As the numbers forecast increased spending from advertisers across the country, will your message be seen and heard? Will your business benefit from the pent-up consumer demand? Salem Surround is prepared to help you deliver the right advertising message to reach all potential customers wherever they are. Your business can be ready for a post-COVID-19 economy, but the time to act is now. Be at the front of the line as our economy begins to fire on all cylinders once again. For a free assessment of your marketing message and strategy, visit salemsurround.com or contact your local media strategist today.
America has been doing some soul searching lately. Perhaps you noticed. We're examining what's right with America and what can be made better. No other country does this kind of introspection better than us. Some of what we found we don't like and will change. Every life has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. That includes our law enforcement as well as every skin color. We've been through this before in America, and we always came out stronger. We will this time too. Our hosts will make sure of that. We are the answer.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri. Senator Talent, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. I loved your interview yesterday with Tom Cotton. I don't want to hijack whatever you want to talk about, but I love what Tom's trying to do.
Well, I think General Deptula wants more. I heard from Pentagon sources yesterday they want more than the $42 billion. We will see. Tell me, Senator Talent, do you think John Bolton should have written a book?
Well, I have a view about this. I don't think people should write books like this, particularly shortly after they leave. No, I don't. I think to do things for history the way Richard Nixon did, which was not generally memoirs, he was writing about policy. I think that's welcome, but I don't like these kinds of books.
Do you know that we still have issues at the Nixon Library and the Foundation about papers that belong to the foundation that still have to go through pre-clearance review before they're published for fear of revealing sources and methods 50 years after the fact? Can you believe that?
No, I can't. They overclassify, and the thing is, we overclassify and then we don't protect the big secrets, right? I mean, I just don't have a lot of confidence that the Chinese and the Russians don't know the things we really don't want them to know. So, yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, people need to get past that. And I've never understood why the high-level political officials don't just say, look, in a month, I want an assessment of this, and then I'm going to make some judgments and make some orders, and we're going to have a more reasonable regime around here.
Now, John Bolton has been sued by the United States government because he did not wait for the clearance process to publish his book. I do not believe the United States will win that lawsuit because prior restraints are frowned on in the law. But to the extent that there's a possibility, I'm not going to be talking about the book on air because I am not going to reveal methods and sources. Why do they matter so much, Senator Talent?
Well, because intelligence, as you know, is a network of processes all going on at the same time that are dependent. Okay, so even if you're revealing like analysis of signals intel that doesn't itself seem like it's giving something away, the analysis of it may reveal people you're relying on or sources that signal something to the other side. And both sides have huge numbers of people working on this. They're analyzing the pronouncements of the other side to constantly see where they have where your side has vulnerability. So yes, it can give things away. You do have to be careful, no question.
Now, in terms of China, the excerpt that the Wall Street Journal published today of Ambassador Bolton's book classifies Trump administration officials as panda huggers, specifically Stephen Mnuchin, free traders Larry Kudlow, and hawks Peter Navarro. Fair assessment, and if so, where ought we to be listening to most?
I would not say that's fair, because I think one of the big achievements of the Trump administration is to fully, and I think finally, shift the strategic direction of America's relationship with China towards competition. In other words, we're actually competing now, and we're competing across a huge number of domains, including the economy. Now, it's the job of people like Mnuchin to point out where, for example, economic sanctions may hurt the United States. I don't think that's necessary. I'd have to read more about it. I don't think that's being soft on China. That's just being smart. In other words, I'm very much in favor of decoupling, but we do have to understand the consequences for our own industry and our own jobs. So, no, I would not. I think the administration, it's one thing that's been clear about from the beginning. It's that the competition with China is the top national security priority, and I haven't seen anybody within the administration fighting that.
Now, your successor, Josh Hawley, gave a speech on the floor of the Senate this week saying the conservative judicial project is over because Justice Gorsuch got it wrong on the Bostock case. I think that's overstatement, and I'm waiting to see Our Lady of Guadalupe maybe today when they release orders. I'm waiting to see the Louisiana law. What was your reaction to really a despairing speech of ever getting the courts repaired?
Well, no, I don't share that sentiment. I was disappointed But I understood when I read Gorsuch's, and I did read a fair amount of it. You know, it's like the whole thing's 172 pages. I read a fair amount of his and Alito's. I think Gorsuch got trapped in a certain logical box, which I don't think was the right way of looking at that statute. But he thought he was textually bound. You know, we don't have enough time, I don't think, to get into this, but he took the similarly situated methodology for determining whether discrimination exists, and he turned that basically into the statutory standard. He confused a methodology for the statute, and I think that's why he thought it was unambiguous and it was wrong. I would not go so far as to say we're going to see some Supreme Court decisions today. I've been very generally pleased with what Trump's appointees have done, and I think there's a lot of good intellectual firepower on the court. So no, I would not go so far as to say the project is over. On the other hand, you know, when you're in office, you make a point, and you know, and he was using that, I think, to make a point.
Very quickly, Jim Talent. Tim Scott gave one of the most heartfelt speeches I've ever heard yesterday. What did you have a chance to hear it yet?
No, but I'm watching it today. We've been working on the China Commission report, so it's kind of taken up my time.
All right, we'll talk about that next week. Senator Jim Talent, thank you. Follow him at Jim Talent, the easiest Twitter handle in America. Jim Talent, stay tuned. Chuck Todd and Chis Christie, quite an hour ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Job Creators Network Foundation.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
And this is really apt for the times that we're living in, okay? I think a lot of people are this letter. He says, my great-great-grandfather was the governor of New Hampshire. His youngest daughter was adopted by the family Key. Frances Scott Key helped her win her inheritance, and she moved from slave Kentucky to free Ohio. She built 4 houses and gave those houses and freedom to her slaves.
Frances Scott Key, who wrote the national anthem, and you're telling me that this woman, who is Jacob's ancestor.
So one of her grandsons died in the Battle of Shiloh. So this is what Jacob says. He says, no white guilt for me. Furthermore, people who say that the national anthem is racist are lying about my abolitionist adoptive families. Now, what's really interesting about this letter, it was accompanied with a photograph, an actual photograph of her grave, and this is what's carved in stone on his great-great-grandmother's grave. Or his
hang on, I'm sorry. This is the woman, this is Jacob's ancestor, who you said moved from a slave state to a free state. And what did this woman do again?
She bought 4 houses and she freed her slaves and gave them her houses to live in so that they would not be living in slavery, but they would be free people. Okay? And he sent a photograph, and it's the tombstone of Nancy Ann Sullivan Key Trunnell. That's her name. This is her tombstone. This is literally carved on the tombstone. Okay, here's a picture of it here. What she said to her slaves, poor little creatures, you shall never be sold into slavery. I will take you to Ohio, get you houses, and set you free.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
I have said that the 2016 election was the most important, and even more important than the 2020. Now I'm thinking 2020 is as important as 2016. Not because of the re-election of Donald Trump, which I think is very important, but because the left will come into power. The left could have both houses of Congress and the presidency, and that would go very far in ending free speech in this country, which is already threatened beyond anything in American history. But my heart breaks for the lack of celebration of America, for the celebration of those who hate America. Antifa takes over a police station in Seattle, and a 6-block area declares itself independent from the United States. Can you imagine if right-wing people took over a central place in Seattle and declared it independent of the United States, the calls for immediate action to take it down? Can you imagine? We are going to create a pro-life 6-block area. Imagine that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The president's efforts to reform police and begin that conversation seem to be met by support in a bipartisan way. Here's Van Jones from CNN. This is a guy who very, very critical of the Trump administration, but can often be fair when it comes to issues like the judicial reform, the efforts that this president has embarked upon. And it sounds like even CNN commentator Van Jones was pretty pleased with the president's announcement yesterday.
Well, listen, I think there are two things here. One is the speech and one is the executive order. The executive order is a good thing, and mainly because you saw the support of law enforcement there. That gives you a sense of where the bottom is, where the floor is for reform, and that floor is higher than it has been. There is movement in the direction of a database for bad cops. We've never had a federal database for bad cops. That's why these cops go all over the place doing bad stuff. The idea that you're going to have de-escalators now alongside cops so you can talk people down and not shoot people down. The chokehold, that's common ground now between Pelosi and Trump. So you see good stuff there.
There's good stuff there. The Republicans are announcing a package that enacts police reform as well. We're having that important movement right now, and it's going to happen. The truth of the matter is you got two sides politically. You got the law and order side, and you've got the face of lawlessness and rioters and looters and violent people.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Pay attention to Jake Tapper being an unbiased, objective journalist. Video cut 3.
There is one group of generals, however, that the president is standing firm with. Dead, racist losers. More specifically, the Confederate commanders, after whom 10 Army bases are currently named. Days ago, the Pentagon said that they wanted to begin a bipartisan conversation about renaming these 10 bases, but the president shut that down. He wants to continue to honor them.
The president is standing with dead racist losers? You mean Democrats, right? Because those statues are of Democrats. Those army bases are named after Southern military leaders. But here's the question, Jake. Did you say that about Obama? Did you say that about Clinton? Because guess what? Fort Bragg was Fort Bragg for a long time. Those statues to Southern generals, correct me if I'm wrong, but they weren't erected in the last 3.5 years, you hack. They've been there for decades. But now this president is standing with racist losers. Why wasn't Obama standing with racist losers? Why wasn't the former governor of Arkansas accused of standing with racist losers by you? Because you're not a journalist. You're a hack. You are the personification of fake news.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. America has been doing some soul searching lately. Perhaps you noticed. We're examining what's right with America and what can be made better. No other country does this kind of introspection better than us. Some of what we found we don't like and will change. Every life has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. That includes our law enforcement as well as every skin color. We've been through this before in America, and we always came out stronger. We will this time too. Our hosts will make sure of that. We are the answer.
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to everyone listening on YouTube, Instagram, and, of course, on my 300 affiliates. Great to have you joined, as we are most Thursday when we are lucky, by Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. If it's Thursday morning, it's usually the Hugh Hewitt Show. Good morning, Chuck. How are you?
I'm all right. You know, we've got a news cycle that's jammed.
Well,
three different leads in 3 different hours yesterday.
Let's start with the Major League Baseball, because we always start with a little sports. Last night, a 60-game regular season beginning July 19th looks in reach with a 16-team playoff format. What do you think?
Well, it looks like finally owners sobered up here. I have to say, my biggest disappointment is think about the owners in the NFL and the owners in the NBA, and then compare them to the owners in MLB. They're shrinking violence. The owners in MLB are acting like they don't care if there's a season, and it's because they can't make that much money. I understand their issue, right? They make a lot more money at the gate. The gate is a lot more important to hockey and baseball than it is to the NBA and NFL. I get that. But I always thought this was, I've just been disappointed in what I think is a lack of leadership on both sides, right? I think this has not been a good moment for either Tony Clark or Rob Manfred. But the owners, there's no leadership there either. Like somebody, who's looking out for the greater good of the game? Right now, it doesn't look like anybody is.
So last week I asked you if
we're going to get something. I think you're right. We're going to get something because they realize it's self-defeating if they don't.
So last week I asked you if the NBA ring that was awarded this year would count. You said yes. Does the World Series ring in 2020 count?
I'll use the same anecdote I used last time. That 1981 World Series of the Yankees means a lot to me. So yes.
Okay. So yeah.
Okay.
Right. Let's go to John Bolton.
If you're a fan and your team wins it, you're
not the Indians.
Right, you're going to care.
You bet. It's going to go up there with 1920.
If the Indians win if the Indians won this year, would you say it counted?
You bet. 1920, 1948, and 2020 are all the same to me if that happens.
There you go.
Okay, let's talk about John Bolton's book. It's everywhere. I've talked about it 3 or 4 times already. I'm the only guy in D.C. that read Surrender is Not an Option, every page of it, but I'm not going to read this book till it's cleared. Do you have him booked for Sunday? Is he going to make the rounds?
No, he's not doing it this weekend. It's the following week he begins his. I think he does this ABC special on Sunday night, and then. So I think the week his book tour basically begins next Monday.
Do you think, Chuck, he can carry the interest? I mean, the New York Times damned him with faint praise this morning because they dislike John Bolton more than they dislike Trump, or they figure they only get one shot at hitting Bolton. They can hit Trump every day. They really panned his book.
I was thinking about this morning. Mark Murray and I were discussing that John Bolton ought to go meet Jim Comey, because in the same way that Comey has no friends.
Oh, that was a spit moment. That was a spit moment. I was drinking.
Bolton is going to find out, right, that, the left mad at him for not speaking out sooner. The right's going to be mad at him for both. If you had something to say, then you should have done it in the proper channels. But, there's a lot of folks who are going to be critical of him for, that this is not something you do. Bob Gates waited until Obama's second term. I'm trying to remember the timing of Stephanopoulos' tell-all, but I thought that was after the first term too. I'm not saying there's no rules on these things, but there is sort of protocol. So I think some people on the right will be angry about that aspect of it. So I think John Bolton's going to find out he's a man on an island if he's looking for allies. But you've known John Bolton a long time.
He's a friend. Been on this show.
Him.
He's been on this show hundreds of hours.
I don't think the arrows will bother him.
Yeah, I shouldn't say hundreds of hours. He's been on the show dozens of hours. I like the ambassador. I do not believe anyone should publish pre-clearance. I really don't. Even if they're slow rolling you should never publish pre-clearance. I won't be reading the book until it's cleared. Chuck, let me ask you about Tim Scott yesterday. One of the most powerful speeches I've heard on the floor of the Senate. Really moving. Does it move the ball?
I don't know. Yesterday, I also noted how I felt like you saw that, and I'm not going to single out individual lawmakers, but I noticed that you had folks on both sides of the aisle looking to be offended, which is never a good sign, looking to be upset about what somebody on the other side said or did. My point is that 48 hours ago, I was pretty confident that you would at least see something out of the Senate and something out of the House, and we might have a conference committee. Today, I'm not feeling so confident, and I think you're starting to see the groundwork being laid where each side will blame the other if this doesn't come to fruition. If McConnell promises an open amendment process, then my mind will change. And then I think, if there is a total open amendment process or at least something that's reasonably open, then I think you might see something. But right now, I feel like everybody's looking for a reason to blame somebody. And that was my fear in an election year and something like this, that there would be that moment where, in an election year when you do compromise legislation, there's a point where you do have to go off the cliff, right? There's that point where you have to take that one step further than you're normally comfortable. And in an election year, that step is really hard to take.
If any speech,
I'm watching it, and folks listening will say, "Oh, it's one side." The point is, it's an election year. You and I both know how much harder it is for them to join hands.
If any speech can move people, if in an election year, Tim Scott's speech yesterday can move people. I am curious what you think his future is in electoral politics.
I think it depends on what he wants. I mean, I think that he, over the last, it's been interesting. In the Trump era, he has, I think, shown more comfort being sort of what I would say publicly independent. That doesn't mean he's not a conservative, but he doesn't feel, you could see sometimes in your first term, senators will take their party cues. They'll look, not overstep their bounds, right? The smart ones do that. You could tell Tim Scott's second term has been somebody who's like, I'll decide when to speak out. I'll do these things. And I think he has certainly brandished himself. The problem for him is that it's a crowd and just among South Carolina Republicans. I mean, we're going to have a sub-primary between Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, right? And then you have to have the Florida primary with Scott, Rubio, and DeSantis. I mean, we got a lot of multi-candidate states preparing there for that potential Republican primary in 2024.
Chis Christie is coming up at the bottom of the hour. Do you think he is still a viable political force for president?
I don't. I mean, why not? And I say this in that I don't. I think the problems he had the first time he ran are probably still going to linger for him. There's still going to be skepticism among some conservatives. There's still going to be. Then there's going to be those in the sort of the not quite the skeptical Trump world who will say, hey, you were too much of an enabler. So I think he's got some internal party politics issues to deal with. But he's Chis Christie 2013 was a Republican frontrunner for president. The guy that got caught up in Bridgegate got defensive, whether that, does the fact that the Bridgegate folks got exonerated, does that skew to his benefit or not? Right? I think from what I understand, he hopes it does. I thought he would try to run for governor again.
Oh.
And then you run for governor, and then sort of, if you're looking to get Bridgegate behind you, there's nothing like having the voters of New Jersey send you back into office, right? And then that's the ultimate sort of, okay, the public has forgiven me, exonerated me, whatever that is. So But the fact is, the guy's too talented of a politician to say, you know.
And he's
right?
young.
So I think it really depends on how he does it. Like I said, I think you and I both know there's that skeptical conservative wing on him that's always sat out there. That's skeptical of any blue state Republican, right? But I think he's got to figure that out. I would, like I said, wouldn't be surprised if he ran for governor again, because that might be the better long-term move if his goal is the Oval Office. You know, he doesn't have to run for president in 2024.
Last question. Joe Biden got hit by the president on Sean Hannity's show last night for not coming out. When does Joe Biden have to do a press conference, Chuck Todd?
As a journalist, I want him to do a press conference every day. I think there should be access to him every day. We had access to him quite a bit on that front. But if you're in Joe Biden's shoes, again, I go back to when you play the Patriots and Bill Belichick does that delay of game business before he punts the ball. How frustrating is it, right? Well, if I were Trump too, I'd be like, get out of the basement, he's Belichicking Trump right now. Why stop?
All right. Chuck Todd, always a pleasure. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Don't miss him then. Thank you, Chuck. I'll be right back, America. Chris Christie is ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Job Creators Network Foundation.
Attention business owners. As America gets back to work, will customers know you're there? With little warning, the coronavirus attacked our nation and our well-being in ways we never anticipated. The tragic loss of life, unprecedented economic upheaval, and a shattered sense of security has left many individuals and businesses in shambles. While the aftershocks could be felt for months to come, they may not have to. There is hope for an extraordinary turnaround of your bottom line. But will you be prepared for America's grand reopening? All signs point to the biggest business opportunity of our lifetime, coming as early as this summer. A recent survey of local advertisers shows a 10-point jump in the number of local advertisers who plan to maintain or increase their spending. 1 in 4 businesses expect to spend more in advertising by the end of June, and more than half expect to restart or surge their spending by this summer. As the numbers forecast increased spending from advertisers across the country, will your message be seen and heard? Will your business benefit from the pent-up consumer demand? Salem Surround is prepared to help you deliver the right advertising message to reach all potential customers wherever they are. Your business can be ready for a post-COVID-19 economy, but the time to act is now. Be at the front of the line as our economy begins to fire on all cylinders once again. For a free assessment of your marketing message and strategy, visit salemsurround.com or contact your local media strategist today.
This is Owen Strand for townhall.com. A call is going out now for the dismantling of the Minneapolis Police Department. The president of the city council said this when asked about what to do in the case of a break-in.
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
There's no doubt that our cities and communities need restoration, including greater peaceful engagement between police and citizens. Yet the idea that wanting protection is privilege is not sound. In fact, it's absurd and won't restore anything. Police who act unjustly are accountable to the rule of law and must be. But there is no need to qualify what a society without police will look like. More harm will surely be done. May coming days bring greater safety and meaningful restoration. I'm Owen Strand.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious freedom is being violated. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The mayor of New York announced back in May that the city would hire 1,000 contact tracers. They make about $60,000 a year, and they go around and make sure that they keep track of the spread of the disease. If somebody has contracted the virus, where did they go? Where have they been? Well, apparently the mayor's office has instructed these contract tracers not to ask whether anyone who has tested positive for the disease recently attended a demonstration. That's right. They are literally saying that instead they'll ask COVID positive individuals general questions to help them recall contacts, but no person, according to the mayor's spokesman, Avery Cohen, no person will be asked proactively if they attended a protest.
What's trending? Subscribe on YouTube today. America has been doing some soul searching lately. Perhaps you noticed. We're examining what's right with America and what can be made better. No other country does this kind of introspection better than us. Some of what we found we don't like and will change. Every life has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. That includes our law enforcement as well as every skin color. We've been through this before in America, and we always came out stronger. We will this time too. Our hosts will make sure of that. We are the answer.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. So good to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show this morning. I'm trying to check the markets here, but I got a very slow computer. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew and Todd are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. www.andrewandtodd.com. It is, of course, the place you go to get refinanced. You want to save some money on your mortgage, and you should want to save your money on your mortgage, especially in tough economic times. You head over to AndrewandTodd.com and you call them at 888-1172. 888-1172. Yesterday, the markets were mixed. The Dow was down 170 points, but NASDAQ was up 14. The S&P was down 11. Yesterday, Amazon went up $25. It's the only stock I own, and I believe that the migration of the marketplace to Costco, Target, Amazon, all the online retailers continues apace. The economy is changing faster than I've ever seen it change in my 30 years of broadcast, and so I encourage you to make sure that you've got as much money as possible by spending as little money as possible on your mortgage. And now is the time, with the lowest interest rates in history, to go to AndrewandTodd.com and help your son or your daughter get a mortgage, because it is absolutely essential that you take advantage of these mortgage rates. Absolutely essential. Let me also tell you that the Job Creator Network has started FlattenTheFear.com. And FlattenTheFear.com, I had one of their doctors on yesterday. I think it's becoming one of the most important websites in America. FlattenTheFear.com. And when FlattenTheFear.com becomes widely known, I think it will inform and advise just as much as the Heritage Foundation Coronavirus Task Force report. I want you to get them both. I want you to go to FlattenTheFear.com to find out what the real risk is and to whom the real risk exists. And then I want you to go to HughForHeritage.com and download the report that I talked about 2 days ago with a variety of experts from the Heritage Foundation, because everyone needs more information than the media. Every time I read these media stories on COVID, I get absolutely confused as to prevalence and incidence data, what they're talking about, where they're talking about it, because it is not organized in any central way. The CDC, there's a lot wrong with the CDC. There are a lot of great scientists there. They really do not know how to communicate anything effectively. I'm sorry to report at this hour that Jane Smith, sister of of President Kennedy, former U.S. ambassador to Ireland, has passed away at the age of 92. Jean Kennedy Smith. Wonderful lady, did a lot of great things for a lot of Americans, and I'm very, very sorry that she passed. Join the family in mourning that. I do want to play for you what I mentioned to Chuck Todd. This is Donald Trump last night talking about Joe Biden and whether or not the former vice president's ever going to come out from the basement. Cut number 16.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting issue, and he's been in the basement for a long time. I think he's really been run beautifully. He's not running his campaign. People are running his campaign. I see quotes all the time that he said this, he said that about me, and they're long, beautiful, flowing sentences. I said, Joe didn't make that statement, and Joe doesn't even know the statement was made, but they are leaving him there, and at some point he's going to have to come out for air.
One more Trump quote from last night, cut number 15 about Joe Biden.
Well, Joe was referring, when he said dirty cops, I believe, to James Comey, and he was right about that one, and McCabe and that group. So he was referring to them, but, you know, it's a different form. It's a different uniform. And, you know, you have bad and you have great. You have cops and police and law enforcement. They're great people, and that's a vast, vast majority of them. And they do an incredible job, and they keep us all safe. And they love their country, and they don't want to make any mistakes. But they're under siege. There's no question about that. And we worked on some things very closely with law enforcement, and a lot of it you had in your show. I noticed the other night you had it on
Coming
your show.
up, my friends, Chis Christie, former governor of New Jersey, Trump friend and advisor. Don't miss it here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
A lot of people wanted to misunderstand it and say he promoted violence, but you have just shown the world that that's not true.
And you know, Alvita, what I hear is he evolved on the issue of violence, later on realized it was an effective tool. To that, I say BS. I want to know what you thought of that.
It's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King Jr. has been nonviolent his whole life. As a matter of fact, out of his 3 siblings, he was the one most likely, when anything else was happening in the community, he would be the one to always remind them that the best way to handle that was violence.
Now, Alvita, I've never asked you this, and if you don't want to respond to it, I've got no problem. We can move on. But was there friction between your uncle and Jesse Jackson?
There was friction. A lot of people do know it. Most people didn't. However, Jesse was more black power, and Martin Luther King was nonviolence, and so they did have discussions of that sort. Jesse probably a little younger than Martin, of course, Uncle M.L., but my uncle, Martin Luther King Jr., was promoting violence, not only...
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The Supreme Court decision yesterday is mind-boggling. That 2 so-called conservatives joined in it is very disconcerting. Even if you agree with the issue of you don't discriminate against transgender and gays, etc., they made law. They didn't interpret law. You argued, or you or your organization argued at the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. John Bursch, one of my colleagues here at ADF, actually argued in the Harris Funeral Home case.
Was he surprised? What did he predict?
Yeah, we all were. We thought at a minimum it would be 5-4 the other way, and possibly even going further the other way. And the reason for that, it was just an issue about what they call statutory construction. In other words, what does the law mean? You don't have to get into the current issues of marriage and sexual orientation to say, what did the law mean in 1964? So that's we're expecting to be what we thought was an easy result by the Supreme Court.
Wow. So now let's talk reality. In Connecticut, every record but one in high school girls racing is held by biological men who identify as women. Will that now be the law of the land?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Folks, welcome back. I'm talking to
Hey,
Charlie
Governor
Kirk.
Swain, how
Charlie,
are you?
This president, seriously, I mean, the other day he held a Bible in front of St. John's Church, and they piled on as though he had held up Mein Kampf. It's just the most bizarre.
Well,
we're living in the strangest times.
I look at President Trump storm Lafayette Park with total open air. The first time I've seen a president do that in my lifetime, holding the book that built Western society, reclaiming the church that was trying to be burnt by the arsonists, holding it up and saying, this book matters. This book is what we have to get back to. I'm going to proclaim it. It was the hero's journey right across that park. And I said, this is beautiful. This will bring America together. This will be terrific. Who could miss the imagery? And then I watched my Twitter feed, and which I try not to do too much, and the cable news, and people say, how dare he hold up the Bible? And I said, this is really not good. And I wish I had better words than that, Eric. And usually I do, but this is so troubling, the direction this is headed. And this is more than Orwellian. I mean, this is something where you have pathological ideologues that are now committed to destroying the opposition at all costs. And Trump has brought them to this point. We call it Trump derangement syndrome. And I think there's some truth to that, but I think it's even deeper and more sinister than that. This is now American destruction syndrome, where at all costs, they want to see our country be totally deconstructed. And so the good news of Trump is it's exposed their radicalism. The bad news is that if he loses, these radicals now have full license to be who they say they are because their masks have now been unmasked.
Keep up with what's trending. America has been doing some soul searching lately. Perhaps you noticed. We're examining what's right with America and what can be made better. No other country does this kind of introspection better than us. Some of what we've found we don't like and will change. Every life has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. That includes our law enforcement as well as every skin color. We've been through this before in America, and we always came out stronger. We will this time too. Our hosts will make sure of that. We are the answer.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt joining me via Skype and on the radio, Governor Chis Christie, former governor of New Jersey, and a wonderful guest when he decides to come pay us a call. Welcome back, Governor Christie. Good to have you.
Happy to be back, Hugh.
Let me start with the obvious question. Everyone healthy on Team Christie? Mary Pat, everybody else, everyone healthy?
Everybody's great, Hugh. Everyone's been healthy, and all six of us have been back together now for the last 3 months. Our two older children moved from New York City back home to New Jersey. And so one of the few silver linings of this whole thing has been bringing our family back together. And we've had more dinners together in the last 3 months than we probably had in the 10 years before that, given my career and doing it. So that part of it's been the one silver lining.
That's good news. All right, first substantive question. Should John Bolton have written his book right now?
Listen, I think everybody gets a chance to tell their story, but clearly John has an agenda with this, and his agenda is to try to affect and impact the election. So, I don't think that's a very loyal thing to do, but John has made the decision he's made for himself, and he has a story to tell. He's going to tell it, and everybody's got to just look at it and gauge it based upon your own experience.
The headline the media has seized on is that he is saying that the president advised President Xi to go ahead with the concentration camp for the Uyghur Muslims. Do you believe that, Chis Christie?
I have a hard time believing that. I don't think that the president is that type of person, and it would be a huge disappointment to, I think, a lot of people if that were true. John's an inveterate note taker. I've worked with John before. I've been with John in meetings. He's an inveterate note taker. So who knows? That's part of the problem with this when you have a he said situation. John's also a detailed note taker. I hope on this one that he got it wrong.
I will come back to Bridgegate in just a moment, but a couple of key questions before we get there, Governor. Are you still talking to the president regularly? Are you giving him advice?
Yes.
What is your advice to him about the national anthem and whether or not he ought to object to players kneeling given changed circumstances in the country?
What I've been encouraging the president to do is to find common ground with people who have legitimate concerns. And there are no doubt that there are legitimate concerns about this. I saw this as governor of New Jersey, which is why we went through some serious police reform in the city of Camden. Hugh, which did two main things. One, at the time in 2012, it was the most dangerous city in America. In the last 7 years, it brought the murder rate down in Camden by 81%. But at the same time, because of new training on community policing and de-escalation techniques, we have also brought down the citizen complaint of excessive use of force by police by 95%. You can do both. And there's legitimate concerns about this across America. What I've said to the president is it's time to listen to those concerns and not worry about counterpunching so much, but take this time to listen and then lead off of that listening.
Now, opposition to players kneeling during the national anthem, and I know you're a Jets fan, and I'm a Browns fan, it has shifted, but it is still a 50-50 issue. There's half of America that objects strenuously to it. What is your opinion on the actual act, and what is your advice to the president about commenting on it?
Well, listen, on the actual act, I think, I would never kneel during the national anthem. I don't think I think there are lots of other ways to display your sign of protest during times like that, and I don't think that's it. I think that the president has made his position clear on this over the course of time, and I don't think he needs to continue to make this a focal point. I think what the focal point should be is on the reforms that he recommended in his executive order on policing, because that gets to the root of what we're talking about. And right now, the American people don't need gasoline on the fire. What the American people need is to be brought together on issues like this. And I think that's a place that a president is uniquely suited to do when you're sitting in the Oval Office. And I hope that that's what he decides to do over the course of the next number of months.
All right, Governor Christie, you knew Mark Zuckerberg before he became a $70 billion titan. You knew him when he was wearing his hoodie and giving $100 million to New Jersey City urban schools. He's in a lot of hot water right now. He's despised by both sides, by many on both sides. The Department of Justice is going after protections for him and other online platforms. What's your advice for Mark Zuckerberg right now?
Well, listen, I still talk to Mark on a regular basis as well, and I think I'd say the same thing to you now that I say to him privately. He has built an extraordinary platform there for folks to be able to communicate around the world, and he should try to make sure that it's used as a force for good. And I think there are times when he's been too laid back, not involved enough, not understanding the power of what he's built. And I think that he's got to get out there and lead. With great accomplishment comes great responsibilities. And I think Mark's got to get out there and lead. I think if he does, he's built an amazing platform that can be a real force for good in this country. But right now, it's a fulcrum for controversy.
He has modeled his approach to content on the American First Amendment, though, of course, he's not a government actor. He's not subject to it. He's modeled his approach to it in that respect. Do you agree with that approach, Governor Christie, for online platforms not attempting to censor content other than that which is clearly illegal?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, Hugh. I think that, it's a very dangerous thing when anybody, and listen, Mark's not a government actor, but he certainly is in a position of enormous power given the size of the platform. And I think that the idea that other than stuff that's clearly illegal, that we should be in there trying to censor people, I think it's a very dangerous road because, we don't know whether the person making those decisions are going to be to our own personal liking or not. And that shouldn't be the way speech is dealt with in this country. So I am a First Amendment advocate, and I'm someone who believes that Mark doing it the way he's doing it, it's the right way to go rather than hand over to Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey at Twitter or any of the other folks on the social media side, the ability to be able to censor what we see and read, unless, as you said, what's being said is clearly illegal.
Last question on this, Governor. It's very important. It touches everyone's life every day. Should these big tech companies be adding center-right conservatives to their boards because they live in the echo chamber of Silicon Valley, and I don't believe they actually hear America at all?
Oh, I think that there should be that kind of
You broke up on me there, Governor.
Out in Silicon Valley. And also, it's even worse than that, Hugh, because what it is it's socially unacceptable to be expressing in many places right of center views, and I think that's a real problem because you wind up getting pressured into situations that you may even think at your core aren't right, but it's become so socially unacceptable in that world to express those views. You need to have not just center right voices, but strong center right voices. Center right voices that are steeped in the idea that every opinion has a right to be expressed here and should be listened to. And that's part of what he's doing with his First Amendment stand on how he does with content. He should, have his board be the same way, as should all the others.
Okay, looking ahead to 2024, have you ruled out a run, Governor?
No.
All right. There are going to be 10 people at least. Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, Senators Rubio, Governor DeSantis, Senator Scott, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Doug Ducey. Is it going to be the same as we had the last time? And I did those debates and you did those debates, and it's unmanageable. Do you have advice for the RNC now about 2024?
Well, I mean, frankly, I think that, you have to do it in a way that's different than what we did in 2016. This slavery to polls at times is just ridiculous. And I think even though I was in almost every one of the main stage debates that we held, except all but one, and so I made the cut, but still it just made it very, very difficult for people to be heard. And there was too much attention on polls. I think that the way the Democrats did it, quite frankly, this year was much better, where there was random selection and break it up so that the debates can be of a manageable size, so that you get to hear more from people. Now the Democrats had 23 people, so it still wasn't a manageable size. But if you had somewhere between 10 and 12 people, and you had two debates of 5 or 6 where people were randomly put together rather than by judging it with polls, which I think was an enormous mistake. Then I think you can hear from people for a substantive amount of time, and gives people a better opportunity to make judgments.
So you may be back in the fray. And so this is sort of a loaded question, but do you expect Senator Tim Scott, who's taken central position and central point for the Republicans on issues of race and policing, do you expect him to be on a ticket in the 2020s?
Well, Tim is a great guy, and I've known Tim for a long time now. He's a smart, good guy, but Hugh, it's hard to pick who would be the vice presidential candidate when you're 2 or 3 weeks away from the choice, let alone 4 or 5 years. So I think we're better off just waiting. Gosh knows what's going to happen in development and politics in this country over that period of time. But listen, anybody who's looking at putting together a good government would look at somebody like Tim Scott, because he's a smart, thoughtful guy who also is honest. He speaks his opinion, speaks his mind. Those are the kind of people I've always loved having around me because they're not afraid to speak truth to power. And I think so if you got a guy like Tim, there's always be a place for somebody like Tim Scott if you were looking for people who are smart, tough, and willing to speak truth to power.
So, Governor, now I want to turn to Kelly versus the United States. Very few people have seen this case for what it is, which is an enormously significant case. Would you summarize what it found and why? I mean, you've tried to talk about it on ABC with George, and nobody lets you talk about it. I read it, the whole, I think it's a 13-page opinion. It doesn't take very long by Justice Kagan. It's a 9-0 decision. It's got to be frustrating and at the same time exonerating for you.
Both. You're exactly right, Hugh. As usual, you've read it exactly right. Listen, the summary of it is this, that when folks are exercising their authority as government officials, if they're not benefiting from it themselves financially, or if money is not the focus of what they're doing, then you can't charge people with property fraud, which is what they charged both Bridget Kelly and Bill Baroni with. And in the end, it was not a federal crime. What happened that day was stupid, and should not have been permitted to have happened. And those people deserve to be fired, which they were. I fired them immediately upon finding out about it. But the Obama Justice Department, and let's be very clear about this, Hugh, and a 9-0 decision makes this very clear, and this is the exonerating part. They made it clear in that opinion, as you read, that the law was settled on this well before Kelly versus the United States, that this was not a crime. The Obama-appointed U.S. Attorney, Paul Fishman, wanted to ingratiate himself to Hillary Clinton and the DNC. At that time, in January of 2014, I was the clear frontrunner for the Republican nomination for president. I was the only Republican beating Hillary Clinton in the polls. I had just been reelected with 61% of the vote, 51% of the Hispanic vote, and 29% of the African-American vote in a state like New Jersey, and they wanted to take me out. And so they proceeded with an investigation that was replete with leaks and unethical conduct, and then proceeded with indictments that 9 justices on the Supreme Court said were not a crime. And in fact, it was clear, based upon the law at the time, that it was not a crime, and no prosecutor should have done it. It's an outrageous act of politicization and weaponization of the Justice Department for political purposes by that U.S. attorney and by Attorney General Holder and Attorney General Lynch.
We're still not at the bottom of this particular sinkhole, Governor, because it appears that the third-party charge, Mr. Wildstein, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, struck a secret deal with the United States attorney, not revealed either to the defendants who then had to face trial without the benefit of knowing that the witness against them had a secret deal, and it was not revealed to the Supreme Court as far as I can read the record. I'm not a criminal lawyer, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn, but I practiced for 30 years. I've never heard of this before. Have you?
No, I was the U.S. attorney, as you know, Hugh, for 7 years in that district. Let's make clear, when Mr. Wildstein made his plea agreement, it said in the written plea agreement that there are no other promises being made to you other than the ones in this document. He stood up in court under oath and said there were no other promises made to him. Yet at that time, the defense lawyer has said they had a secret deal with U.S. Attorney Fishman that if, in fact, this was ever overturned by any court, that they would vacate his guilty plea. And what happened this past week, Hugh? They vacated his guilty plea.
So does that not lead to the conclusion that a fraud has been perpetrated on the court, the defendants, and the Supreme Court by lawyers in that office and probably at Main Justice?
Yes, sir, it does. And I will tell you that, what happened here, and the reason it's so awful, as you know, is that when you have that kind of deal where, Mr. Wildstein was at no risk. If there was a conviction, he got the benefit of his cooperation in his deal. If it turned out that it was an acquittal or an overturn later, he walked away anyway. That would be very important stuff to be able to cross-examine him on.
Yes.
To his credibility. And it's a direct violation of a United States Supreme Court decision in United States versus Brady, which says that it is unethical and illegal not to turn over that type of information. And so we have not yet gotten to the bottom of all this, Hugh. And it is that's what makes you see even more that this was a desperate political attempt to smear me. And because you were covering it at the time, the reaction from the media was extraordinary. More than you've seen for almost anyone who was not already president. In fact, I remember running into Jon Stewart on the streets of New York in the couple of weeks after the Bridgegate story broke. And he said to me, geez, Governor, I didn't know you were already president of the United States of New Jersey, based on this reaction. And so it's clear, Hugh, it was a political hit job. Hillary Clinton did not want to run against me, given my success with Hispanic and African-American voters and independent voters in New Jersey. And they weaponized the Justice Department. And Paul Fishman, what was he shooting for? He was shooting for being Attorney General in a Hillary Clinton administration. Now, fortunately for us in the country, she lost. So that never came about, but that's clearly what he was shooting for.
So that brings us to the Brady Rule, and it brings us to General Flynn. And not a lot of people understand the Brady Rule, but it's the heart and soul of due process. If there's exonerating evidence, the Department of Justice or any prosecutor in any county in the United States has to turn it over to the defense so that we do not wrongfully convict people. What do you make of, as a former United States attorney, what do you make of what is going on in Judge Sullivan's courtroom vis-a-vis General Flynn?
Clear violation of General Flynn's rights. Now, we don't even have to get to the question of whether you believe General Flynn lied or he didn't lie. This is about the obligation of the Department of Justice to do what the title says, which is justice. And the idea, Hugh, is that you've got to turn over all that exonerating information or any other information that calls into question the motives of the prosecution so that the defense has it available for review and potential cross-examination of witnesses. This is, as you said, the heart of due process. If the government has information that they're unwilling to turn over to the defense to give themselves an unfair advantage, this tilts the already tilted plan even more in favor of the government. And that's just simply not right, Hugh. And I think that in the end, it's an indictment against what's going on right now in our country that we're going forward with this. Listen, you read my book. I have my problems with General Flynn, in terms of a presidential advisor, but he does not deserve to be railroaded into a prison sentence because the government didn't like him.
Have you ever, in your experience as a United States attorney, had a Rule 48 motion? Did you ever make a Rule 48 motion to dismiss a case against a criminal defendant?
We never did, but the reason we didn't, Hugh, was because we never brought cases unless we were absolutely convinced that we had proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why in my career, we did 130, for instance, political corruption cases without an acquittal. That's not because we were lucky. That's because we walked away from a lot of marginal cases. And so, no, I never had the opportunity to do that, Hugh, in my time. But I will tell you this. What's going on down at Judge Sullivan's courtroom is something that I've never, ever seen before. The executive branch, the Justice Department, has the right to make these decisions about which cases they bring and which cases they do not. And the idea that the court appointed a separate person to look at it, then allowed that retired judge to take shots at the Justice Department, where's this going to end? I hope that it'll end, if not at the district court, at the D.C. Circuit, where they restore some sanity to the process. We have the executive branch has the exclusive right to bring these charges, and they should have the right to make those decisions. And then the public can make their own determination on whether they think the decision is right or wrong. But here, when you had clear evidence that the FBI was attempting to game out whether they wanted to get the truth or whether they wanted to trap him in a lie, that's not the job of the FBI. The FBI is to find the facts, turn them over to the prosecutors, let the prosecutors make the decisions.
Now, Governor Christie, as an experienced governor and a law enforcement officer, as a prosecutor, as you look at what Director Comey, Deputy Director McCabe, Mr. Strzok, Ms. Page, all of their actions, and there may be intelligence community people involved as well, there might be White House people involved as well. What is your reaction to this? Because no one seems to mirror my level of outrage in the media, which is, I think this was an attempted legal coup.
The fish rots from the head down, Hugh. And, what you had here with Jim Comey was him replacing his own judgment for the law, his own judgment for ethical responsibilities. And they were fatally flawed. From the actions that you see regarding the dossier to the actions you see regarding the investigations of Flynn, but even going back further, his conduct during the Hillary Clinton email investigation was outrageous. And even though those actions wound up benefiting, I think, Donald Trump politically, they're wrong. And they should not have been done. Jim Comey is not the person deciding whether someone should be prosecuted or not. He's the head of the FBI. You investigate it and you turn it over to the career prosecutors in the Justice Department to make those judgments. Then he inserts himself back into the election weeks before the election day in clear violation of Justice Department policy. He was running a rogue operation at the FBI. McCabe, Strzok, and Page are examples of the fact that the fish does rot from the head down. And Jim Comey, and I worked with Jim. Okay, he was the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan when I was the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. He was then my boss as Deputy Attorney General. It's not the same guy I worked with. He lost his way. He became convinced of his own BS, Hugh. And when someone does that in a position of power like the FBI, it is dangerous for everyone in America.
Governor Christie, do you believe indictments will issue from U.S. Attorney Durham's investigation?
Well, I'll tell you this. If it's appropriate for indictments to issue, John Durham will seek them. Because I've known John since my time as U.S. Attorney. He is a professional, fearless guy who believes that the mission of the Department of Justice is the same that I believed it to be, which is to do justice. So I don't know what evidence John has, and I can't speculate on that, Hugh, but I'll tell you this. Bill Barr picked the right guy to go and look into this, because John Durham's a pro.
Bill Barr is taking a lot of incoming, Chris Christie. What is your assessment of Bill Barr as Attorney General?
I think the Attorney General has done an excellent job. And I think he's done some very difficult things.
Let me close by a couple of questions. You're cutting in and out, Governor, but I want to close with 2020. Joe Biden is in the basement. Can he run a campaign from the basement? What's your advice about Donald Trump and the Biden basement campaign?
I think the only way Joe Biden will win is if he stays in the basement. I think if he comes out of the basement and this becomes a binary choice, I think the president stands a very good chance to be reelected. And so I think Biden is listen, Terry McAuliffe, who's a friend of mine and who I know well from our time as governor together, part of Terry's good part of Terry and the bad part of Terry is whatever he's thinking, he says. And he said Joe Biden should stay in the basement. They don't want this to be a binary choice. They want it to be a referendum on Donald Trump. You never want it to be a referendum in this country. You want it to be a choice. And if it's a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I think Donald Trump stands a very good chance to be reelected. But the president's got to draw him out of the basement. And the way to do it, in my view, is not attacking Joe Biden. The way to do it is for the president to go out there and be talking about the great things he has done for this country and the direction that he wants to take it in for the next 4 years. When he does that, Biden will be scared not to come out and talk. And when he does, I think the choice will be clear.
Now, my very last question, Governor Christie, and you've been generous with your time. Josh Hawley gave an impassioned speech on the floor of the Senate yesterday declaring that the conservative project for the courts has fallen. It's failed, that Justice Gorsuch's opinion in the Bostic case means it's all over. I don't agree with that, but I'd like your assessment as we await the Supreme Court today, and they may be issuing cases on the Louisiana abortion law. They may be issuing cases on the right of Catholic schools to hire and fire as they choose. They may be issuing cases on DACA. Do you think the conservative judicial project has failed?
No, I don't. And I think it's wrong. And I think the senator, with all, I think if you look at the majority of what this court is doing, it has moved in a center-right direction. And you're always going to find some cases where people don't do exactly what you predict they may do. But that does not mean this has failed. And when you look at the overwhelming majority of opinions here, this has been a very solid, very smart conservative majority on this court. And I think that they've led people to even on the liberal side to make some decisions. Kelly versus the United States we were talking about before, that's a conservative ruling that
yes.
they convinced Elena Kagan, who, by the way, remember, was a member of the Obama Justice Department, to sign on and to author. So I think it's far from a failure. And unfortunately, I think the senator is making a political statement, trying to, enhance his own conservative bona fides even more in preparation, as you mentioned, for 2024. I don't think you could look at Neil Gorsuch and look at Justice Kavanaugh and say that along with Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas and John Roberts, that's a failure. Far from it.
Governor Christie, thanks for your time. Keep coming back.
Anytime you invite me, I'll come. It's one of the smartest places to talk in America about important issues. I'm always happy to be here.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.